All right, welcome back to the Outlet Podcast with Gabe and Eric. I'm Gabe, and that's
Hi,
Eric. So we thought we'd start off with a little brief touch on the coronavirus and the updates of what's going on, and then we're going to move on from it because we're kind of beating a dead horse at this point.
Yeah,
We've talked about it so much.
Yeah, we're as tired as talking about it as you are about listening about it. So
Exactly.
yeah, I mean the big number, apart from the number of deaths and infections itself, is the number of unemployed people or people that have filed for unemployment here in the U.S. As of this week, 6.65 million people have filed for unemployment in America, which is significantly higher than during the dot-com bubble crash of 2001 or the recession of 2009. So it seems like we're kind of heading into some unprecedented waters, and I don't know, to me it seems like there's no way we can overcome 6.6 million unemployed people without any sort of negative consequences.
Yeah, definitely.
For the country as a whole.
It's just 6.6 million people. That just blows me away. It's a massive amount of the population. And, that's your aunts. That's your uncles. It's so close to you. It's not, it's so many people that it will affect you.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people are losing tons of money in the stock market right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you know the r/Wall Street Bets. Do you know that?
They're going crazy, huh?
They're going crazy, man. They're going crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, we've talked about it before, but that's really the weird dichotomy, which is how much do we care about people's health and how much do we keep open?
Mm-hmm.
My dad's position is screw it. Let's just open everything back up.
Yeah.
People will die naturally.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well,
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Do you think you have any position on that? Like, should we just open everything tomorrow?
I think that ultimately we need to protect the people that are most at risk, right? Which is mostly old people, right? And people with, compromised immune systems. And Sweden is actually doing taking a very similar strategy to that they are aiming for herd immunity, that they are allowing business to continue as usual. They've pretty much quarantined all the old people, right, in old people's homes, or legally mandated them to stay at home so that they don't get infected. And of course, if you do have the virus, you are you show symptoms, you are opted to stay home, and they've got a pretty hefty welfare state that gives 6 weeks of paid sick leave every year, so people are allowed to use that.
So they're already prepared for the pandemic, right?
Pretty much, and they have a good amount of state resources put aside and allocated for this sort of crisis. But ultimately, what the cause of them not shutting down the whole country, the way some countries are being shut down, is that they are they think that by hurting the economy, which will inevitably happen if you shut down the whole country, there will be less money for the healthcare service because it is state funded, and it would ultimately hurt the fight against coronavirus. Now, of course, that's just one of the reasons. They also don't want to instill mass panic and chaos. But people are encouraged to take individual measures like social distancing, like wearing masks, like, self-quarantining if you have symptoms. But it is, a far cry from the drastic measures that are taken here in the U.S. I think that in the U.S. we're kind of a land of extremes, right? Where we have a significant amount of country where people are going nuts, right? And, literally going into apocalypse mode, just hunkering down in their basement with canned food ready for 2 months. And
people are killing themselves.
Yeah. And then, you have the other part of the country that's like, it's a hoax, this is the NHS trying to, take over, and,
it's a bioweapon by the Chinese. Have you heard that?
It's the deep state getting at us, don't believe their conspiracy lies. And, that happens, I feel like, with every major event in America, is that you have the Alex Jones types calling it a false flag.
Well, it's not even necessarily Alex Jones. It's like pretty mainstream people, know?
Yeah.
Like Rush Limbaugh, for instance.
I don't know about mainstream. Rush Limbaugh's a little nuts in my opinion.
Well, I mean, he's a popular guy.
But Yeah, and I mean, just to speak to that point that Americans are kind of crazy, is that a train operator in LA. So to give a little context, there are two Navy ships that have docked in L.A. and New York, and these are Navy hospital ships, and their job is basically to take non-coronavirus patients from hospitals in those cities and treat them on the ships, which have 1,000-bed capacity, and that will basically,
Give us a lot more beds.
Yeah, exactly. Free up space,
Mm-hmm.
allow the hospitals in those cities to treat coronavirus patients more effectively. And in LA, a train driver, a train engineer, has been listening to, conspiracy theories and lies that, the coronavirus is a hoax and that it's a government plot for, increased government power and, repression of American citizens' freedoms. And so he tried to drive a train into this naval hospital ship that was docked at the port of Los Angeles, and he didn't make it, because the train tracks don't go all the way to the edge of the ship, so he just ended up going about 100 feet off the tracks, and then the train stopped. Right?
Did he die in the?
No,
he didn't die?
No one died, but he's facing like 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
For train wreckage, which is apparently a pretty hefty felony.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jeez,
charges
man.
train wreckage.
Never heard that.
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's crazy, man. I think that's it's pretty messed up that there's news that's actually feeding him that this stuff is just all a hoax.
Yeah, all
and
a
that
hoax.
I've heard the claim. My brother even mentioned it that this is a bioweapon by China.
By China, they're gonna get us.
They're gonna get us.
I mean, not a very good bioweapon because they dropped it in the middle of one of their biggest cities.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier that Wuhan was like a second-class citizenry, right?
I mean, colloquially among Chinese people, right? But ultimately, it is an economic powerhouse. The state of Hubei, or the province of Hubei, and I don't know. I just think that it's against the interests of the Chinese government to drop a bioweapon in the middle of China.
Yeah.
And
what about those Chinese reports that they tried to claim they had less deaths and less cases?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that
they're fake. Come on, they gotta be fake.
Yeah. I mean, the Chinese government fakes data all the time, right? That is a known fact. They fake economic data. They fake census data. They fake, in this case, coronavirus data. But I think that it's important to use the adage that we must remove the log from our own eye before we, look at the stick.
Do you think we fake data?
No, I think that hospitals are firing employees who speak out about, lack of safety equipment and lack of regulations.
Really?
And, and it has happened. There have been nurses and doctors that have been fired by U.S. hospitals
by saying we don't have enough ventilators.
Right, we don't have enough ventilators. We are using plastic bags instead of safety gear. And the hospitals are firing them. Now, it's not the state, it's not the president hitting them with the decree.
No, but it's a
you're fired,
massive corporation.
Yeah, I mean, it is ultimately a wing of the state, the hospitals that are, repressing whistleblowers and stopping people from speaking out about the truth of this virus, and undermining the truth that America is not at all ready to face a crisis of this severity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've not done a very good job of making sure that we're prepared. But let's move on.
Yeah.
We said we wouldn't get too deep into it, but we started.
We can talk for a minute about this. But before we continue, I want to sort of apply the concept of marginal benefit, right? How much good you get for each additional dollar spent on a different government institution, right?
Okay.
And I would like to compare our disease-fighting institutions like the CDC and our hospitals and, all the local institutions that help fight these, pandemics, and then the military, right? And so first, let's sort of agree that disease and pandemics is a significant threat to America, right?
Yeah,
American
certainly.
National security, the American economy, the American people, all of the above, right?
Definitely.
Diseases are a threat, right? Right?
I can agree.
We can agree, right? And if we look at disease as a significant threat compared to enemy nations, to put it colloquially, as a significant threat too, I think that we should look at the marginal benefit of spending additional money combating either of, or preparing to combat either of those attacks, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Attacks from
That's national security, right?
Right.
Providing enough resources and materials to defend against outside threats and also a global pandemic.
Exactly. And I would class diseases as outside threats, right? We need to be prepared.
Yep.
I mean, even if they come from
National
within America,
security.
right? It is a national security threat, and it seems like coronavirus has damaged America more than many of our wars have in the past, right?
Yeah. Especially in the last 70 years, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So the concept of marginal benefit is that as you increase spending on a certain thing, you receive less and less benefit, right? So as we boost up our military budget from $700 billion a year to $800 billion a year, which it is now, right? We and all the numbers I'm saying, other than those budgets, are going to be hypothetical, pretty much, just for the point of the argument. So if we boost our military budget by $100 billion a year, which is a significant amount of money, it may only increase our military capacity by 5%.
Yeah.
Right? Because at this point, our military is incredibly ballooned and overfunded, right? And in order to increase our capacity past that, it's going to take an incredible amount of money, right? We are already the cutting edge of military technology. We already have the best equipment. We already have bases all over the world. So in order to increase our military capacity by 1%, it's going to cost a ton of money, right? Because it is already so massive and so advanced, right?
Yep.
And then let's compare that situation to our disease fighting and institutions, right? The CDC and all the local institutions that fight diseases like the coronavirus. They are massively underfunded, right? The CDC has, under the Trump administration, they cut the budget of the CDC by $1 billion, right? So instead of boosting its budget, they cut that budget, right? And if you look at its total budget, it is significantly less than the budget of the military, right? And I mean, in a lot of ways, that makes sense, right? America is an imperial power, right? And we need to maintain imperial hegemony over much of the world. And as a result, we overfund our military. But let's look at the situation where we take $1 billion from the military budget and we give it to the CDC's budget. Because of the concept of marginal benefit, it will result in significantly higher capacity for the CDC than the reduced capacity for the military, right? Because we already spend so much in the military, getting rid of $1 billion from the military and giving it to the CDC, we improve CDC capabilities by 20-30% while only reducing it by less than 1% in the military.
So if you give $1 billion to the military, it'll have a very, very tiny effect on the military. But if you give $1 billion to the CDC, it'll have a massive effect on the operations of the CDC.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the marginal
benefit.
benefit. Yep.
We got to think of, how much benefit do we get from this $1 billion and where is it best spent? Where do we bolster our defenses as a nation, and where do we, protect our national interests and our national security in the best way? And I think that hopefully our nation's decision makers, use this crisis as a wake-up point, right? Where they are able to really look at and reassess the priorities of our nation, and hopefully, fund more, pandemic fighting responses. And I mean, not just responses. I mean, that was something that the Obama administration did, was they, implemented a pandemic response team, right? They had plans in place for what if this happened, this is what the states are supposed to do. This is what, these institutions are supposed to do, and putting money aside for that. But not just that. I mean, I think that we should really take a militaristic approach to fighting disease. We got to have warehouses full of masks and ventilators. We got to have warehouses full of pills,
for
right?
people
just
who
ready to go.
need them.
Right. The same way we do with our military. We have nukes hidden all over the country. We have, warehouses full of tanks and F-16s hidden all over the country, hidden all over the world even. Because we're ready at any time to face a military threat. However, we're not at all ready to face a, biological threat.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just makes sense that when you increase the amount of money given to the military, let's say it's $1 billion, which $1 billion is kind of lost its luster at this point because we just made a $2 trillion deal. But $1 billion is still a ton of
is a
money.
ton of money, right.
And it can do so much.
Right.
So giving an extra $1 billion to the military and taking away $1 billion from the CDC, I would even say that the pandemic is more of a national security threat than a military invasion, because the countries that could invade us, they're not near as powerful as we are.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at it monetarily, right? America spends more on its military than the next 7 nations combined, right? So that means if you add together Saudi Arabia's, Russia's, China's, England, France, Germany, Israel, all those countries, all added together, all their military budgets, it still doesn't, equal what the U.S. spends on its military, right?
Yeah, which is crazy.
Which is nuts, right? And so I think that it's easy to say that no country can military challenge the U.S., right? So
that's pretty safe.
Yeah, continuing to boost our military budget. I mean, it upholds that status quo, but I don't think that status quo should be upheld while the American people are suffering and dying, right? If that is the cost of imperial hegemony of the world, I don't think that that's something that we should pay for. That's not something the American people should submit to when we don't really reap the benefit of that imperial hegemony.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Right.
I mean, and again, you have to consider the threats, and when you have the ability to donate money to the CDC and know that it will instantly improve the situation of coronavirus in America.
And I mean, not just right now, the next one. Because there is going to be a next one, right?
There is going to be a next one.
Right.
Happens like every 100 years or something. So yeah, and this is all hindsight too, because if we had done this before, we'd be a lot better equipped to deal with this now.
Definitely.
But since we're in the midst of a global pandemic, it's hard to get those resources. And so dumping all the money now will even have less of an effect on the CDC. But if it was before, it would have a massive effect now.
Yeah.
But this is all hindsight. Like we see it now, but
Yeah.
But so what could be? What do you think is going to come out of this from the coronavirus? Do you think the military, or not the military, the government's going to decide that we need to have more funds for, Center for Disease Control and preventing, mass hysteria? Do you think that's going to be?
I think that. I mean, that's what I hope, right? Is that our nation's leaders look at this situation, learn from this situation, and learn that we need to be better prepared on the biological warfare front, right? We need to be prepared for diseases and pandemics. However, I think that America, as a nation, has a short memory, right? We forget stuff easily, right? And I would not be surprised that if within a year or 2 years we are back to the status quo of underfunding the CDC and not providing surplus supplies for warehouses or for hospitals, not being over prepared for the next pandemic, and just continuing to shovel money into the mouth of the overburdened military, right? Or the overfed military, I should say.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and I think it makes total sense, and I think every American citizen would also be on board with that too,
right?
Because we don't see the actual benefits. Well, I mean, we do by having a safe place to live, but when the government donates $800 billion to the military, if you're not a military family, then you don't really see those benefits. But if
or a military contractor,
that's true. Yeah,
that's where a significant amount of that $800 billion goes.
That's right.
Right into the pockets of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin.
Yep.
And General Atomics and Boeing, all those boys.
That's right. That's right. And so we don't see that money at all, but those the CEOs of the companies do.
Oh yeah.
So the American people, we don't actually see the benefits of having an $800 million contract to the companies who make missiles, But if $800 billion was given to the CDC amidst a global pandemic, we would definitely see it.
Yeah.
And we would definitely be appreciative of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And, where does that money actually come from? Well, the money comes from our tax dollars. And a lot of it is created, by assuming more debt. But, if we had donated $800 billion, which you said was the military budget, right? If we had donated $800 billion, in maybe December, right before this whole thing got huge, then we would be a lot better equipped.
Oh yeah, we would be on top of it. We would not be running out of masks. We would not be running out of safety equipment. I mean,
That just blows me away. That doctors don't have the proper
like
material clothing
like
to.
I saw a picture of nurses in New York. Literally, they were wearing trash bags, like black trash bags that they just had tied around their necks and put holes in for the arms, and that was the equipment for the day because they had run out of the real proper safety equipment. And like, I don't know, can we even claim the title of being a first world country anymore if our nurses and doctors are wearing trash bags in the midst of a global pandemic? I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, we're supposed to be the best country in the world. We're number one, right? Yet when it comes to a crisis, we're not even able to combat it. We're not even able to protect our soldiers on the front line that are combating it.
Well, there are steps being taken.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's certainly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Medical professionals wearing trash bags as protection against the virus. It just blows me away.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of doctors and nurses who are seriously in despair because they understand the scope of this whole thing. And they see that they're underprepared and understaffed, and they don't have adequate resources.
Oh yeah.
And so I think I heard there's been many stories, but there's a lot of people committing suicide just from the burden of having to take care of these people, nurses, doctors, and stuff committing suicide.
Yeah.
And so there are steps being taken.
There are steps being taken, right? We're not just sitting by and watching it.
That's right.
And
Trump has decided that he wants to do a press conference every day, which I think is a pretty good step. I mean, that's what FDR did during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
I want a press conference every day so that I can speak to the American people directly and tell them what I'm doing. Like, that's pretty good.
Good stuff.
It's good to see the face of your president every day.
Depends on what you think of the president, right?
What'd you say?
I said it depends on what you think of the president.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure plenty of people are opposed to him being the person that's leading the charge against the coronavirus.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, but he's still our president, and
he is our president. That's right. And we got to respect him, right?
That's right.
But just before we wrap up here, we said we wouldn't talk about it, but
we started talking about it.
half an hour down the chute. But so before we wrap up, so updates for the U.S. There are 236,000 cases in the U.S. and 5,648 deaths.
It's what, like 5% or the people die? Less than that?
Like 2%.
2%.
Yeah. But then again, excuse me, I generally believe that the number of reported cases is probably less than the actual number. And
absolutely.
The death number is probably much more accurate, right?
I'd be interested to hear a medical professional give an estimate over how many people they think has the coronavirus in the United States, because there's tons of people, I'm sure, that have the coronavirus just haven't gotten tested.
Yeah.
But
and they're not counted in that number.
No, it's confirmed.
236,000, right? But if they do die from it, they will be counted for the death number.
Yeah, have you seen those in New York? There's just ambulances with dead bodies. Like a truck driver he took a video and he was carrying dead bodies from the hospitals that have died from the coronavirus.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a proper morgue, that's a
no.
truck.
Yeah. And I mean, New York alone has experienced 2,373 deaths, right? They are now, the epicenter of this outbreak, and I mean, it's really tragic.
Definitely. All right, you want to move on?
Yeah, let's talk about something more uplifting, right?
Sure. Do you want to talk about the little philosophy thing?
Yeah, let's do it. So, let's start with some premises, right?
Oh, that's a good place.
So, I think that when decisions are made, they should be made to bring the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people, right?
Yep.
Base concept of utilitarianism, right?
Yep.
The most good for the most people. That is the decision that we should make, right? However, individuals should be allowed to make decisions that benefit themselves as long as it doesn't harm others, right? Can we agree on that?
Say that again.
So individuals should be able to do something that makes them happy, benefits them, even if it harms them, as long as it doesn't harm others.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So, we all know smoking cigarettes is bad,
Yeah.
right? But if you want to smoke cigarettes, you should have the freedom to.
Yeah.
As long as you're over 21, right, here in California.
That's right.
But yeah, so you should be able to do something, make a decision, even if it harms you, as long as it doesn't harm others, right? Where's I going with this? I forgot. Drank too much coffee. Yeah. So basically, we have sovereignty over ourselves, right? We are allowed to control what we do, even if it harms us, as long as it doesn't harm others, right?
That's right.
And in general, as a society, we should make decisions that benefit the greatest amount of people, the greatest amount, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to, in that perspective, based on those premises, take a look at drugs and prostitution, right? Their role in our society, their position in our society, whether they should be regulated, legalized. I just want to have that discussion with you, right? So let's start with prostitution.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a it's a simpler topic, right? So can we agree that prostitution is going to happen, regardless of government regulation or legality, right?
Yes.
There will always be prostitutes willing to sell their bodies, and there will always be Johns willing to pay for sex.
That's right.
Right? And before I continue, I would just like to acknowledge that there are male prostitutes and there are female Johns, but for the sake of this conversation, we are going to just say that all prostitutes are female and
the majority of them are.
All Johns are male, right? Which it's not true, right? But
it's not true, but the majority
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna continue with those genders for the sake of the argument, right? So yeah, there will always be prostitutes willing to sell their body, and there will always be Johns willing to pay for sex, right? However, when the state makes prostitution illegal, it harms both prostitutes and Johns, right? Can we agree on that? That when you get arrested for prostitution, your life gets harmed, right? And when you get arrested for soliciting a prostitute, your life gets harmed. You get locked up for 6 months, and you have a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the state, on your record, right? That has a negative impact on your life, whether you're on either side of the interaction, right? And in addition to that, when prostitution is illegal, pimps take over. Pimps start to rule the prostitution business. And we can agree that pimps are bad for prostitutes. Pimps are violent. They take money from prostitutes while doing no work themselves. They often beat their prostitutes. They get them addicted to drugs to keep them in the cycle of prostitution. Overall, pimps are bad, right?
Yeah, pimps are bad people.
Pimps are bad, right? Not only bad people, but bad for everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So based on those premises, I think that prostitution should be legalized and regulated, right?
Mhm.
Because making prostitution illegal allows it to enter the black market, and the black market will inevitably lead to violence on prostitutes, right? Sex trafficking, all sorts of non-consensual things. Both the Johns and the prostitutes are harmed when the law gets involved. Arresting prostitutes, arresting Johns, and it's something that's going to happen regardless of legality, right?
Yeah.
There will always be prostitutes willing to sell their bodies
So
for money.
we should legalize prostitution because it would be better to not have pimps who control prostitutes, because prostitution is going to be around anyways. So we should just legalize it, maybe make some tax money off of it,
And regulate it. Right. To benefit both the prostitutes and the Johns, right?
The Johns. Yep.
And this is not a radical, unprecedented idea.
It's been around.
It's been around, right? All of Australia has legalized prostitution, and
Amsterdam as well, right?
Amsterdam as well, and a lot of counties in Nevada, which is the only place in the U.S. where it's legal. It's a lot of rural counties in Nevada, and I want to take you through, what these brothels are like, these legal brothels, right? So you go in. Usually there's a bunch of prostitutes milling around in the lobby, right? You pick your prostitute. Your prostitute looks at you, says yes or no. Sure, I'll take him. I won't, right? She states her price. You say, yeah, sure, $300. That's a good price, right? You're pretty hot, right? And you get taken upstairs by a bouncer. You get put into a room. the bouncer inspects you, right?
Make sure you don't have any.
Visible warts or anything like
Yeah.
that, right? And then you have to put on a condom. You have sex with the prostitute, right? And the entire time there's a bouncer right outside the door walking around in the hallway, so that if the prostitute or you want to stop it at any point in time, you just yell and the bouncer comes busting in and breaks it all up, you know? So and then you know, if you compare that to you know, illegal prostitution, where, you know, you're driving down, you know, Nebraska Avenue or wherever it is the prostitutes hang out in your city, and you know, you see one you like, you just pull over. Hey lady, how much, right? And you know, they hop in the car, you go to a seedy motel somewhere, you know, there's nobody there to protect either of you, right? The prostitute might rob you, you might rob the prostitute or even kill the prostitute, and you know, who knows?
Really, this is
who
an
knows what's
ethical
gonna
question,
happen, right? It's
It's not.
question.
It's an ethical question, and you know, looking through the lens of utility, right? The answer is very simple. Oh, we should legalize prostitution, right? Because if we legalize prostitution, we make money, and that's good for us continuing, you know, making roads and our military and the CDC, right? That's a good thing.
And I mean, not only that, but you can, with the tax funds from legal brothels, you can fund rehabilitation programs for prostitutes, you know, education programs, you know, programs that allow them to get out of the cycle of prostitution, get them an education, get them other jobs, right? Allow them to exit the cycle of prostitution if they want to, right?
Well, and my question to you would be, well, do you think prostitutes want to be prostitutes?
I mean, I think that a lot of them don't, right? Ultimately, there are often nefarious instances that lead to a woman becoming a prostitute, right? Sex trafficking, abuse in the, you know, a woman's younger life, and, you know, oftentimes, you know, arrest for prostitution is a significant part of that. You know, once you have on your record arrest for prostitution, it's
hard for you to get
much
jobs.
harder to get a job, right? And so you are often forced to going back to being a prostitute, right?
Yeah.
However, I do think that there are plenty of women that see that as a viable option and are willing to do it as a career, right?
Yeah, well, I just don't believe that prostitutes
anybody wants to do that, right?
Well, no, not that anyone wants to do it, because there are some pretty messed up people in the world. But I do think that most people who are prostitutes don't want to be prostitutes. I mean, just think about it for half a second. Like, do you really think you want a smelly, fat, tension-having dude coming into your brothel and saying, "Hey, lady, let's go upstairs"? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. And
Yeah, and I
and
mean,
so I really think it's, if we legalize it, right, what we're doing is we're saying this is a viable option for all women, that instead of
and
men,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
for
Well,
our
mostly women,
purposes,
right,
yeah, let's just say
sorry,
women.
Sorry.
For our purposes, let's just say women. But you know, there are male prostitutes, you know, out there seeking whatever her name is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just don't see it as a very good idea to legalize prostitution. Let me give my whole picture here. From a utilitarian perspective, yes, it just makes sense.
It's better for everybody.
It's better for everybody,
Right.
Because we get to make prostitution a taxable new market. It's untapped. Everything that was all prostitution before was done in cash. We couldn't see the money. We don't know where it's going. You know,
Oftentimes it goes to pimps, right?
oftentimes it
We
just
agree.
goes to pimps.
Are bad, right?
Are bad.
Just get money out of their pockets.
That's right. So from the utilitarian perspective, hey, it's great. It's an untapped market.
Right.
We
And I
can
mean,
tax.
the-
We can make money.
The main thing for me is not necessarily the tax revenue. You know, that's a plus. That's a pro, right? For me, the main thing is protecting prostitutes, right? You know, making sure that they are able to live right at the end of the day, right? Make sure prostitutes don't get killed, right? Allowing them to engage in their job without contracting STDs, without, you know, being in fear for their life, you know, from their pimp or from the John, allowing them to, you know, be under the safe protection of a bouncer, right? Which, in my opinion, will only happen if we, you know, legalize and regulate prostitution.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but
so
this
it's all about
actually
protecting prostitutes, making sure they're safe, making sure they're healthy, allowing them to live happy, fruitful lives, and the tax revenue from
It's just
legal brothels
another. It's
will-
just another plus.
Right, it's another plus. It can be used to further protect and allow prostitutes to exit that career, exit the cycle.
Yeah,
of
well,
prostitution.
and you've mentioned exiting the career a lot, but if you open up prostitution as a legal occupation, then it's going to be attracting more people. And you've mentioned a few times that the best thing we could do, well, one of the best things we could do is provide counselors and provide people who can help people get out of the ring of prostitution. But by legalizing it, you would get thousands and thousands of women who decided, well, I can't make money anyways in this occupation. Let me just become a prostitute because I know I have a surefire job and it pays well.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so, and here's another thing. This is really an ethical question. It's like, what are your morals?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I'm a Catholic,
Right.
And so I
You
don't
think
believe
prostitution's bad, right?
I do think prostitution is bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But for the benefit of the state, okay, I understand that perspective. But morally, it's wrong, and it's I think it's also reprehensible too. But should we tell women that it's fine to sell your body to make money? I don't think that's good because I believe humans have consciences, and carrying that burden of I had sex with 200 guys a month for 3 years, right? Having that in your mind all the time, I just don't think is healthy. And you know, I believe in heaven as well, and selling your body to make money, and of course, you're not married to these people.
Oh, yeah,
having
of course.
premarital
Premarital
sex
sex, that's a no-no,
is
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So morally, I think it's wrong.
Yeah,
But from the position of utility, I think it's I don't want to say it's fine, but I understand it.
Yeah.
Because and again, your main point is that the prostitutes nowadays are getting hurt a lot because they have pimps. They're getting addicted to drugs because the pimps want them to get addicted to drugs because it's easier to keep them. And that anything could happen between the Johns or and the pimps with these women.
Yeah, when you're in a seedy motel, there's no one looking after you.
That's right. There's no bouncer outside the door.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the argument that it's going to happen anyways, so we should just try and regulate it, doesn't address the morality of the situation.
Right, right. So, I mean, I think that to go back to one of the premises of my argument, that humans, in order to have free will, should have the ability to make decisions that they might think benefit them, even if it ends up hurting them. Right? That is one of the
People do it all the time.
Right. That is one of the premises of free will, is that you have the ability to make decisions that might hurt you in the long run. Right? And I mean that's one of the fundamental relationships that humans have with free will in Christianity. Right? Is that humans have the ability to make wrong choices, right?
Yep.
And that's why God doesn't make all our choices for us, is that on this earth we have the ability to make right or wrong choices, right?
Yep.
Because we have sovereignty over our own bodies, right?
That's right.
And I think that ultimately we should uphold that sovereignty, right? That people are allowed to make bad choices, right? Because it's their bodies. They do what they want with them, right? And
Well,
I'm,
let me
I'm not a
interpose-
Catholic.
let me interpose this real
I
quick.
don't think that being a prostitute is going to get you banished to hell forever, right?
That's right.
And I don't think that. I think that ultimately, the opposition to prostitution is rooted in an opposition to sex in general, right? Just not being sex positive. That sex is only between a man and his wife, right? And I think that is something that we are, generally moving away from in society. Now, I think that, ultimately, the church can do all that it can to curtail prostitution and encourage prostitutes not to do it. Give them their spiel, right? Of you shouldn't do this, right? It's morally wrong. But ultimately, I think that the church should have the freedom to preach, right, and to encourage people to not do what the church thinks is wrong, right? But in addition to that individuals should have the freedom to do what they want with their bodies, right? And as long as it is consensual, right? Both parties are in agreement that they want this thing to happen, right? Both the prostitute and the John agree to the to the money, right, and the situation,
Yeah.
right, then I think that neither party is being hurt, right? You believe that they are being hurt because it's moral wrong and it's sinful, right? But as long
Well, I don't
as
necessarily think that it's just only sinful. I think it's also the women actually do get psychologically hurt by doing this. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that when people have sex with 40-year-old fat whatever people, they think about it. It's like, I'm sure there's thousands of people out there who have had sex with people that they shouldn't have, that they know that it was not good for them, right? Like, and again, to your first point about excuse me, to your first point about free will, right? There's 2 points. Yes, humans have the ability to choose things on Earth, right? We can choose what is good, and we have the ability to choose what we want, right? But the part 2 to that is we have to choose what is good, and we have to choose not to do things that are bad, right? So yes, we have free will, and our free will is our intellect guides our choices that we make, right? So yes, humans do have free will, but that doesn't kill the argument that we should do things, based off of our morals, right? Because again, this is a moral argument, right? It's, do you think premarital sex is bad, and having sex with 400 people is bad? No, I don't. Okay, then prostitution's fine. But yes, I do. Then prostitution should be kept illegal.
Yeah.
And again, me saying that I don't want these prostitutes to be prostitutes. Okay, that isn't at all me saying I don't understand their position that they're in. I do understand the position that they're in. They're in a desperate position. They need money. Okay, so they turn to a pimp and say, "I'll sell my body." Right, and so I'm not at all downplaying that they're suffering people. Right, and by saying that, I think that the state should lock them up and give them felonies, misdemeanors, charge them money. Like, I'm not saying that they deserve it. Right? All I'm saying is that I think it's morally wrong for prostitution to be a legal option, an occupation. And I think by legalizing it, what you'll do is you'll increase the amount of people to be prostitutes. And you even mentioned that we should provide counselors and things of that sort to these prostitutes right now, so that they get out of the ring of prostitution. It's like you're allowing more people to take the position, but you're also advocating for people getting out of the position.
Right. Because ultimately, to me, it comes down to sovereignty over one's own body, right? That we should have the ability to do what we want with our bodies, right? And if that means engaging in prostitution, you as an individual, you have the free will to do that. And you and I, we're both opposed to prostitution in general, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. To me, it's not something that the church can stop. It's not something that the state can stop. It's not something that we as individuals can stop. To me, I think it's pretty much always going to happen, right? It's colloquially referred to as, the oldest profession in the world, right? Prostitution. It's always existed in every society, right? Even the most, repressive authoritarian ones like the USSR or modern China, prostitution still exists, right?
Yeah, and it exists in many of the poor countries around the world too.
And to me, I think that the church should do all that it can to prevent it, right? But I don't think that, repressing the sovereignty and freedom that individuals have forcefully is the right way to do that. I think that, the church can put out a lot of propaganda, right? Put up billboards and, tell them why that, prostitution's bad, right? And, send missionaries and priests out to the brothels and try to get them to not do what they're going to do, right? But ultimately, I don't think that the church or the state should crack down on individuals that choose to engage in prostitution. I think that, like you said, it's a moral decision, whether what you believe is right or wrong. And, you think it's wrong, I'm kind of iffy on it, you know what I mean? And I think that we should uphold that individual position, that it's up for, it's up to each individual to decide for themselves whether they want to engage in prostitution or not. And by, clamping down on that, we are hurting prostitutes unnecessarily, right? and we allow them to continue to, live in the cycle of pain and prostitution that they live in now, right?
Yeah, well, and again,
so let's try to find common ground here.
yeah,
right?
sure.
So
sure.
so
From a utilitarian, I think this is where we kind of
Yeah.
agree,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If we were only doing this for utility
Mm-hmm.
and for not the salvation of souls per se, right? Because that's what I'm concerned with is the
Mm-hmm. Right.
salvation of souls.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you don't believe in heaven or hell,
Mm-hmm.
you heretic. But yeah. So from the utilitarian perspective, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We should legalize prostitution because the prostitutes are being hurt as
Mm-hmm.
is, and if they had the ability to not be hurt by legalizing it, such as giving a bouncer, providing a bouncer,
Making everybody wear condoms.
making everyone wear
They get
condoms,
tested for STDs once
Yep,
a week, right?
Yep, once a week, and having a a head of the brothel, not a pimp. Like that's number one, right? Just not having a pimp run the show. From that perspective, yes, makes sense, right? But since I have my faith behind me, I have to say no because I think that having sex before is wrong. But the common ground I think we can stand on this is that if there was more government regulation in prostitution, that would be ultimately beneficial for the prostitutes and for the Johns, and those are the two people involved. And eliminating a third party pimp would be even more beneficial because then the pimp is the government who controls.
Well, it would be the brothel, right?
Okay, yeah.
The brothel
It'd be the
would
brothel. Yeah, it'd
essentially
be the
be the
head
pimp.
of the brothel, right?
But now instead of it being
But it'd be heavily regulated.
exactly,
Right.
so now all of a sudden the brothel can't beat the shit out of prostitutes and get them addicted to drugs. Instead, it would be federally regulated. There would be health codes. There would be regulations in place in order to protect both the prostitutes and the Johns. But so I want to find a policy that we can agree on, right?
Sure.
So you agree that punishing prostitutes and Johns criminally hurts both parties, right? That when prostitutes get locked up, they get a misdemeanor or felony on the record, it hurts them and ultimately leads them to continue down in the cycle of prostitution.
Yeah, well, what it's trying to do is it's trying to discourage them from doing prostitution again, right? But what it ultimately does is it encourages them to do prostitution again because now they can't find jobs. So when you catch a prostitute, when police catch prostitutes and they write them a felony charge, they're saying, oh, well, I'm punishing you for this act that you did so that you'll be discouraged from doing it again. But what ultimately ends up happening is they end up falling into a cycle of prostitution after that. So, yeah, I think it hurts them.
Right. So do you think we should decriminalize prostitution? That we should still not legalize it, right? It shouldn't be that you can go out and go to a legal brothel, which is my position. I think there should be legal brothels, but instead just not punish Johns and prostitutes with the fist of the law.
See, if you decriminalize prostitution, what you're doing is encouraging prostitution at the same time, right? Because by saying, oh, well, if you get caught being a prostitute, we don't do anything. What that'll mean is to women who, are kind of in a hopeless case, that means I can go out and I can sell my body, right? Which I'm against encouraging new prostitutes coming in. So no, I can't agree on that.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I guess that was my softest pitch, right?
Yeah.
Decriminalize it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, what could be done? So let's say a police catches a prostitute. Should we write them a felony charge? I don't think so. I think what should end up happening is they go to like a rehabilitation center and they go through a process of saying, well, here's some other alternatives to being a prostitute. We'll set you up with a job. That's great. And we'll give you some guidance on, and we'll get you away from this area. Like usually it's I can't say usually, but I'm sure people who are prostitutes are really afraid of getting out of their area because if they try and escape or try and leave, they're going to get beat by their pimp. So, if you catch a prostitute, what you should do instead is not give them the felony charge because that'll just hurt them for life, but instead try and set them up with another job, try and get them to move location, provide enough money so that that's actually possible too. So yeah.
Sounds like decriminalization to me.
Well, okay.
Because if you're not making these people criminals, you're not giving them charges. That's the process that Portugal did with drugs, is that when they catch drug addicts with non distributing amounts of drugs, They sent them to rehabilitation centers and got them their lives back on track.
Yeah, so
right?
what I'm trying to work out is how do you do that but also not encourage prostitution? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
because I
think
feel
that-
like one of the fears with
I
people
think-
going into the prostitution, not prostitution institution,
Yeah, the
but-
prostitution institution.
but the
It's
you
got
know
a nice
just a
ring to it.
prostitution
Yeah.
ring.
Yeah.
You know, to one way to discourage people from entering that occupation is by saying if you do it, you'll get a felony charge. So that definitely prevents people from doing it.
Yeah, it sort of acts as the stick, right? But I think that we should focus more on the carrot, right? That I think that a lot of the reason why so many people go into prostitution is because they have no better options, right? They feel like that is their only way to make money and that they have no valuable skills to, give them another path, right? So I think that the I don't know, an effective way to fight prostitution is to eliminate the amount of people or, reduce, and not eliminate people obviously, but, reduce the amount of people that have no other options, right? And I think that the best way to do that is through education, right? To fund community colleges,
Certainly.
to fund education programs, to reduce the cost of education so that people that are in a desperate situation have an alternative other than prostitution that allows them to, seek other opportunities to better themselves and to find a path that does not involve prostitution.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just that putting
I
money
think
in
that's-
education is like
we
number
always-
one.
We always agree
We
on
always
that.
agree on that.
Right,
It's like,
right,
come on.
right.
I mean,
yeah.
you put more money in education, you'll have instant benefits. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, definitely.
And a lot of unseen benefits too, right?
Definitely.
Just having a more smart. And here's another thing.
Yeah.
No one grows up saying, "I want to be a prostitute."
Yeah.
Like that's not.
No.
That's not what you.
Kindergarten, everyone else is writing an astronaut.
Yeah,
I'll be an architect. You're like, I want to be a
prostitute. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's not a number one career path, right?
No, yeah. But I would say the same thing for cashiers, right? There are plenty of people that
Are cashiers.
are cashiers that don't want to be, right?
It's not their career path.
No.
Yeah, but I think the common ground that we both agree on is that from the position of utility, it makes sense. Now, since I have my moral background in the Catholic Church, I can't encourage it. But
Right.
what I was trying to work out, and you're right, it does sound like decriminalization, which was what I was saying I was against like 5 seconds earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess decriminalizing prostitution would be number one. But what I'm trying to work out is how much would we decriminalize it and also maintain not new people coming into prostitution?
Yeah. I mean,
Because if you decriminalize it, can you see how more people would be
Yeah,
taking
I
into
mean,
the occupation?
I see that in theory, right? That, a felony charge is a barrier that might prevent someone from going into prostitution. But, I mean, let's kind of think about it realistically. Like, the people that go into prostitution don't really have any other options, right? Can we agree on that, right?
Yeah, they're desperate for
They're
sure.
desperate, right? And I think that there's not a lot of people that would consider prostitution as an option. However, it's illegal, so I'm not going to do it, right? To me, there's not a lot of people out there, from my experience, and I haven't talked to that many prostitutes, right? But to me, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people out there that are like, yeah, I would totally be a prostitute, but it's illegal, so I'm not going to do it, right? To me, that's not a big part of the population. There's not a lot of people that are in that demographic. So to me, it's not really the barrier that is constructed is ignored by a lot of people, and there's not a lot of people that really respect that barrier.
Yeah, okay, I see that. And I'm sure if we looked at the other countries who've actually decriminalized it, we could actually see some real evidence on it. But yeah, I just don't know. I mean, from the moral position, no, it's certainly wrong. From the position of utility, it's fine. I mean, if that's all you care about is, making a occupation more safe, more regulated, okay, I'm sure that's fine. But since I care about people going to heaven and hell, I gotta say that it's just wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I'm glad we had that talk.
Yeah, it's good. That's a good talk.
Good
I've actually
talk,
had it
right?
before,
Yeah.
but I've learned some new things having that talk.
Yeah.
I guess decriminalizing it would be a very good thing. I mean, mainly for the prostitutes and trying to get the prostitutes out of it. Because, like, that's a big problem with America's police and our justice system. Number one is that instead of trying to take the people who commit crimes and set them up with a different job and a new location and try and help them improve their lives, we just say, nope, you're going to jail for 20 years.
Yeah.
Cost us a ton of tax dollars, too.
Yeah.
It's so expensive.
It's super expensive.
And
right?
it's less beneficial for the people, too.
No, yeah, it's really bad.
It's very inefficient.
I mean, it'll cost the taxpayer less to house somebody, put them in public housing so they don't have to pay rent, and then send them to college and put them on EBT, right? So literally all of the necessities of life are paid for, and they are in education, bettering their lives and bettering society as a whole. It costs less to do that than to lock somebody up for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, feed them all their food, and keep them in a maximum security prison, right? That is extremely expensive, right?
It's just
prisons
so
are really
inefficient.
expensive,
It's
right?
like, what do you want? You just want to lock these people up because they tried to rob a bank.
Right.
They had a knife and they were trying to rob a bank,
exactly.
because they were already homeless and poor.
Yeah. It's ridiculous, right? That our country's quote unquote justice system emphasizes punishment over rehabilitation and helping the people that need help in this country. I think that's really reprehensible, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that another big part of that is private prisons, right? That the fact that we have for-profit companies that run prisons, and those companies have significant political influence that encourages our nation's leaders and our politicians to maintain the incredibly high incarceration rate that we have, furthers the cycle of poverty, the cycle of incarceration, and the cycle of pain and suffering that we have going on every day throughout this country.
And they're acting like we don't have enough evidence on this.
Yeah.
It's like we have tons of evidence that when a person commits a felony charge, their life gets messed up indefinitely. And certainly they can't find jobs.
Yeah.
They can't apply for a loan.
Yeah.
There's it just blows me away. And we still have capital punishment in many of the states too. It's like,
and I mean that's not even, talking about, the psychological damage that prisoners are, get put through, right?
Yeah. Did you see the sorry to interrupt. Did you
go
see
ahead.
the what's it? Minefield, what's his name?
Vsauce
Michael here. Did you see that when he was locked up in the
solitary
confinement
yeah.
for what, like 72 hours or something like that?
Yeah.
He went insane.
He went crazy, yeah.
He went crazy.
Right, and we do that to people every single day.
All the time, every single day.
Right.
And it's still allowed.
It's torture.
It's it's probably the worst form of torture too.
Yeah,
because I know many. Well, myself, I can speak for myself. I would rather go through physical torture than go through psychological torture.
Right. Because the thing is, you get waterboarded. It sucks, and I'm not trying to defend waterboarding. but there's not a lot of lasting damage physically from waterboarding. I don't know.
I think there's psychological damage too. But I mean, let's just say let's say they're cutting you or something.
Right? Yeah. You're getting your fingernails pulled out. It sucks, right?
That sucks.
Not trying to
downplay
that pain, right? But when you get put in solitary confinement, your brain rots away. Our brains need to have social interaction. We need to have engagement with other people, right? That is a key part of being human and functioning, right? And when you take that away from a person and lock them in a dark room by themselves for weeks, if not months on end, you are literally just chipping away at somebody's brain, right? And their ability to process things. And then you throw them out into society and expect them to get their life together. I mean, that is an impossible task, right? And then we act surprised when someone who's been in solitary confinement for 6 months goes and commits a crime, right? Like, well, no shit, that's what's going to happen,
Seriously.
Like, this person hasn't talked to another person, has had their food fed to them through a little slot in the door for 6 months. Like, yeah, no shit, that's what's going to happen,
Yeah. Jeez, man.
America's prison system is
terrible.
It's fucked.
It's messed up, man.
It's fucked.
And it blows me away that capital punishment still exists. I don't know your position on capital punishment, but I'm sure
it's horrible.
That's what I think too.
Yeah, and I mean some people say that it's cheaper and more effective, right? That if you're going to have somebody in prison for life, why not just kill them right away, right? But the thing is, capital punishment to kill a person, right, to execute them is extremely expensive. And it's actually more expensive than keeping somebody in prison for the rest of their life, right? Because simply the amount of fees and paperwork and legal bureaucracy that you have to work through in order to get somebody approved to put them in the chair or, get them a lethal injection is extremely expensive. And it's been proven time and time again that it's actually cheaper for the taxpayer to simply keep somebody locked up in prison for the rest of their life.
I don't get it, man. And here's let me offer kind of an alternate perspective. Let's say, there's a person who committed a robbery and he's unfit to continue in the world, right? Because he's very psychologically messed up. He's got he's got tons of just demons in his head, and he's not fit to continue in civilization at all in any position that he's in. Well, what do we do with him if we try and release him back into society with a good job? What should we do with those people? Because I think what the real opposition to rehabilitating criminals and not just locking them up. The people who are against it are like, well, I don't want them in the coffee shop that I'm in. I don't want them, getting gas next to me. So the ultimate perspective is, well, I don't see them. And I don't really care if I see them, because if I see them, then I'm at risk. And, it'd be better for them to rot away in prison for the crime that they committed because they deserve punishment instead of being around me because it makes me unsafe.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that? Because it's obviously true.
I mean, I'd say that is a cruel position to take, right? That you are putting your supposed safety and well-being, which I think that is often exaggerated, right? That we're never safe in America, right? Even if you're living in the cushy suburbs and all your neighbors, you are at risk all the time, right?
Yeah, everyone dies,
and there's crime everywhere, and you can't escape that, right? So I think that now I'm not saying that people shouldn't take steps to try to escape it and protect themselves and their family, but I think that by taking that position that everybody should be locked up, right? Only me and my neighbors are okay, and only people that are like me are okay, right? It is a position that hurts people, right? Unnecessarily. And I think that it's, rooted in racism, to be honest, right? I think that our country is a racist country. Can we agree on that premise? That America...
No, I can't agree on that premise.
Really?
No, I mean there are racist parts of the country for sure.
Right.
But our country as a whole is racist? No, I can't. I don't buy that.
I mean, race plays such a huge role in America, right?
Yeah, well, definitely.
It's a huge part of America.
But it's not tribal. Like, we're not sitting here saying, well, in some places in the South, it certainly exists. Like my grandmother, for instance, is a racist.
Right. But I think that, even in, white suburbia here in Southern California, we're not openly racist. Like, we're not, KKK members, right? But I think that there is a lot of, subtle racism that goes on sort of unknowingly, right? And that we're kind of not aware of.
I think people
right?
are treated pretty fairly.
Right. But there is racial differences. Can I say that in this country that people of different demographics are treated differently in this country? Right.
Yeah, well,
whether it's someone that's openly racist and just says I won't hire a Mexican because I just don't like Mexicans, right? Or it's someone that has more subtle racism that he doesn't look professional, right? And what does that mean, right? What does professional look like? Is it a white guy in a suit and tie, right? And because this guy is of color and looks like some stereotypes that I believe that I shouldn't hire them. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of stumbling over my words here because race is such a hard thing to talk about, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it shouldn't be a hard thing to talk about.
Right. But no, I mean, I think that it
is, that's for sure. It is,
it's
but
a
it
really
shouldn't
hard
be.
thing to talk about, right?
So
but I think that we're white people.
Yes, we are.
We are white people. And
we are.
And from our perspective, it's easy to say, America is not racist, and America is not a prejudiced country, and everybody is treated equally. And I think that is true for us, right? We have never experienced, racial discrimination as a whole here in America, right? We have not been denied from jobs or, gotten shady looks from people, or, had, mothers pull their children across, the road, right? Because we haven't experienced that, right? So it's easy to say it doesn't exist, right? Because it hasn't impacted us, right? I'm not saying that wholly, right?
Yeah,
I have experienced racial discrimination. I went to Chinese school, right, where I was the only white kid in the school, and there were some
racial discrimination.
Yeah, things that came with that, right? But I think that when it comes to racial discrimination and racism in America as a whole, we need to listen to the voices of people of color. We need to hear them, hear their stories, and if they say that there is racial discrimination in the country, I think it's our job to believe them.
Yeah, well.
And when you listen to people of color in this country, overwhelmingly, they say that there is racism in America, and I, for one, believe them.
Yeah, no, racial discrimination exists. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but is it as prominent as you're making it out to be? I don't know. I really just don't know. I think yeah, when we hear the stories of black kids, on the streets, and a police officer pulls over and beats the shit out of them. Like, we hear those stories, and it really makes my blood boil when I hear those stories. Like, come on. We already solved this problem. Let's move on away from this problem and not address it. Or not. It's not even a problem. What am I saying? We've already addressed the problem of racism during the Civil War, and up to 1960s when we integrated the schools. We faced the problem. We've decided that our previous habit of discriminating against colored people in this country, black people in this country, was wrong. And we figured it out. It is wrong. And let's move past it. And so when I hear stories like, black kids getting beat the shit out of, by a cop, it really makes me angry. So yes, that does certainly exist. But is it actually a problem today in mass, we'll say? I don't think so. I think we've moved past the whole black people are bad in the eyes of white people. I mean, it exists, but it's not. I'm making kind of a very vague argument here. My argument is this: that to say that that racism still exists is true. It definitely still exists. Is it a national crisis? I don't know. I don't know the scope of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's as huge as people are making it out to be. And when Colin Kaepernick took a knee at the flag, right, which was a pretty big deal, and you had all those, my brother's fighting in Iraq, and
because nothing to do with your brother.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's about racism.
It's about racism.
Yeah.
I understood it.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I certainly thought it was a good thing to do. I mean, I think you should respect your country and all, but I get it. And if black people are saying that they're being unfairly discriminated, then yes, I think that there should be some steps to say, okay, well, maybe they are. Let's look at the evidence. There is evidence that, black kids are getting beat and by white cops, and that's not good. And we should try and solve that. And so, I think there's a real, I think where the problem really lies is in the South in some places, because there is unfair discrimination there. And also in police forces around the country. Because we've talked about police a bunch already. We've talked about police a lot. But I think...
And our position is, fuck cops.
Yeah.
All cops are bastards.
No, that's Eric's position. I don't think
I'm generalizing. I'm sure there are some cops.
There are probably some good cops now.
Probably. Maybe. 1% at most.
But yeah,
the police as an institution,
not
thumbs down.
Thumbs down. Yeah.
2 stars out of 5.
2 stars. Oh man, if I had to write a review, I'd give it a 1.1 out of 10.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just I don't know. But let me wrap this up.
Yeah, wrap up. Give me a conclusion.
I'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
My conclusion is this: does racism exist in the police? Yeah, there's bad cops for sure. And does it exist in some jobs? Like, a person won't hire Mexicans because he doesn't like Mexicans. That's also pretty bad. Should we take steps to improve that? yeah, we should say you should not discriminate unfairly against Mexicans. You should have to hire Mexicans in your position, in your job. I think there's logical steps to combat this. But do I think on a whole black people are just, you know, we are, ever since the end of the Civil War, we've just been pushing African American people away from taking any position in government or any position in a big CEO of a company, and that they're just repressed people. No, I don't think they are. I think after the 1960s, we figured it out, and we've been making steady improvements to treat these people more fairly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because it does exist, but in general, I think we're going away from racism.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you make some good points, right?
Thank you. I got a point.
Right, yeah. That racism is not legally allowed anymore, right? That you can't legally discriminate against people of color, right? But I think that there are a lot of institutional examples. The prison the prison system being a glaring one, that, and the justice system as a whole is a glaring example of racism being very much alive today, right? And I like to sort of tie race into the conversation about poverty, right? That people of color are as a whole disproportionately in poverty, right? And to me, it's no fault of their own, right? That people of color are disproportionately in poverty, right? And people of color have less total wealth than white people, essentially, right? To me, that is not the fault of people of color, right? And it is ultimately the fault of America as a whole, right? And so right, we disagree on that, right?
Sure.
Right? But let's look at how poor people are discriminated against, right? To me, that's something that is glaring, right? That people that live in poverty don't have nearly the same opportunities as affluent people, and people that live in poverty are discriminated against in almost every single institution in this country, right? The justice system being a glaring one. If you don't have enough money to pay your bail, if you don't have enough money to buy a bail fancy lawyer, you will fare worse in the justice system, right? And I mean that's just the justice system, right? And if you live in an impoverished neighborhood, you get treated worse by the police, right? That is a fact, right? So that's one glaring example that people that have less wealth get treated worse by the justice system, right? Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Right? And not only that, education, right? In this country, education is tied to wealth, right? The more wealth you have, the better education you'll get, right? Because you can access education that, if you're affluent, you can access more education than if you don't have wealth. I'm stumbling over my words here.
No,
I'm trying to be
concise
and politically correct, right?
Yeah. I don't care about political correctness.
Right, but I do.
So let me address one point that you had.
Let me continue. Right. So let me wrap it up nicely. Right.
Sure.
So in almost every institution in America, whether it be jobs, whether it be education, whether it be the justice system, people that live in poverty are discriminated against, and they are not treated as well as affluent people. Right. And because people of color are disproportionately in poverty, to no fault of their own, as a result of these institutions that continue to discriminate against people of color and people that live in poverty, the two are tied together, right? Mm-hmm. That because people of color disproportionately live in poverty, they are disproportionately discriminated against by the institutions in this country. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
It definitely makes sense.
Right. So poor people are treated bad, and because people of color are disproportionately poor because of the institutional racism in America, people of color are treated worse than affluent people.
Yeah. Well, to your first
Not
point,
saying that people of color aren't affluent. I'm just saying that white people are disproportionately more affluent than people of color because of the institutional racism in this country.
man, you got to be so careful with your words. I just let it loose. But to your first point.
Yeah.
To your first point,
Uh-huh.
that black people are disproportionately in jails and locked up.
And to give one specific fact, right? Drug use in communities of color and white communities is the same, right? White people and black people use drugs at the same level, right? That is FBI facts, right? It's around 9%, right? However, people of color, especially black people, are in prison at almost twice the rate of white people for drug-related crimes, right?
Yep.
That's just one specific example
Sure.
of black people getting treated worse than white people because of institutional racism, stereotypes,
Sure.
and the justice system in this country as a whole.
Yeah. So my position is really that it's a cultural problem. Okay. And I'll explain what I mean. So to your first point about black people being incarcerated at a rate much higher than white people. Well, you have to consider what are people doing to be incarcerated? And to be incarcerated, you have to commit a crime, right? So, and you get tried. You get a jury of people who decide whether or not you did the crime. You have to have evidence to prove that the person did a crime. So I think the justice system is correct in its incarcerations of most people, right? I'm not saying about the wild cases where a person, gets tried for murder and they didn't actually commit the murder and you hear about it on the news. I'm talking about the majority of people who get incarcerated and go to jail, committed a crime. Okay, so based on that premise, that people get tried fairly in juries, there's problems with it, but usually they're right. Okay, why are the black people in jail more than the white people? Okay, it's because they're committing more crimes than white people. Okay, now I'm not politically correct at all. So as you can probably tell.
Yeah.
So not speaking about the one drug that white people and black people use the exact same amount of drugs, but black people are in jail more than white people for drug incarcerations. Not speaking about that because I don't know about that, but I believe it, of course. But I think the problem lies in the culture. And you had mentioned that they're in poverty from no fault of your own, which I also agree. There's many, many reasons why people are poor. And to say that it's only attributed to their hard work is wrong. There's so many factors. There's so many reasons why a person can be poor. And poor people are disproportionately incarcerated, right? Because if you're poor, you're desperate, and you commit crimes because you're desperate. So one step to the solution of the problem of black people being incarcerated more than white people is improving their living conditions. We can agree on that.
Oh yeah.
So does that mean that there's racism ripe within the justice system and the institution? It exists, but is it the majority of all the people in the justice system are incarcerating black people at a higher rate? Well, I think you have to ask yourself, why are they getting incarcerated at a higher rate? They're not getting incarcerated for, walking down the street and a cop pulling them into the car. They're getting incarcerated because
Although that does happen.
It happens, but it's a very rare case.
And it happens much more for people of color than
But it's rare.
white people.
But it's rare. And the majority of people who are incarcerated is because they committed a crime. We can agree on that. So I think you have to ask yourself, why? Why are they in jails more? It's because they're committing more crimes. It's not
right. So
it's not because there's just this racism that's running rampant, and then white cops is walking down the street and sees a black kid and he says, "Oh, you're going to jail," right? For no reason.
Happen. That does happen. Right.
Yeah. Okay. It does happen.
Where cops say, "We're looking for a guy," right? You look like that guy. hop in the car.
Okay. Yeah, but it's
Never
such
mind,
a
never mind.
rare case,
We
right?
found the guy. Get out of the car.
But
right?
but I'm speaking more generally here.
Right. Let's speak generally.
It does
right?
happen,
So it does happen.
but
right?
it's a
And
very very small
let's-
percent.
Let's look at the root cause of crime. Ultimately, we can agree that most blue collar crime happens because people live in poverty, right? And they don't see a viable option to escape that poverty, and crime becomes a viable option, right? So because people of color are disproportionately impoverished, right, to no fault of their own, we can agree on that, right? They are more likely to commit crimes because of that poverty, right? Not because of any sort of, racial science or anything like that, right?
Yeah, it's not
Right,
like
right.
in their genes
No,
or something.
Nothing of that sort, right? But because I'm trying to be very careful here, right? Because people of color are disproportionately impoverished, they are disproportionately encouraged to commit crime because of that poverty. Can we agree on that? So to me, the people of color are disproportionately caught in the cycle of poverty and crime, right? That when you are born into an impoverished family, you are more likely to commit crimes, right? To no fault of your own, right? That's the family that you were born into. You had no choice involved in that. And to me, it seems like the effective way, now, like you said, it's a cultural problem. America is a racist country, right? And race is something that, even though it's not legally enshrined anymore, it's very much something that is still alive in this country.
Yeah,
right?
but that's not the point I'm making. I'm just saying it exists.
Let me
Okay,
continue,
go
right?
ahead.
Yeah, so America is a racist country. That's something I believe, right? It has been race has been a part of America since before it was America, right? And white people have enjoyed the benefits of America much more than people of color.
Just like every civilization as well. I mean,
not necessarily, right? Race is a bigger part in America than many other countries, right? And race as an institution and a collective myth is a big part of America, right?
it exists in every people.
Not
Yes, it does,
not,
because
not to the extent that it exists in America.
okay, but
we
let me bring
race,
this
we
up.
think about race. In America, race is a bigger institution and a thing we think about more than many other countries.
So there
right?
was a test done by a psychologist whose name escapes me, but what he figured out was that people of color, or not people of color, but people identify and trust people of their race more than they trust people of not their race. Right? On average. So yes, it exists in every culture. So me and you, it's probable that we identify better with each other because we're both white, right? And we both have, very similar, although, different upbringing, and we have, similar morals, and we're both the same color. Like,
yeah,
you get what I'm trying to say? People of the same color identify with each other better.
Right. So racism is a thing that humans tend towards. We lean towards tribalism.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And race is a part of that tribalism, right? But to me, it's something we need to fight against. We need to fight against that tribalism, right? And
Certainly.
And I think that there's a lot of ways we can do that, right? The most important is ending the disproportionate impoveritization.
That's probably a word.
Right? Probably. Of people of color in this country, right? As long as people of color are disproportionately poor, they will be disproportionately discriminated against because
they're committing crimes.
The institutions in America discriminate against poor people.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's based off the
so
premise that poor people commit crimes, right?
Right. I mean, wealthy people
Do commit crimes too.
commit crimes, and they have a bigger impact than poor people.
That's right, and they have the ability to get out of it too because they have better lawyers.
Yeah,
which I think is messed up.
It's really messed up, and so I don't know. So yeah, attacking poverty is a effective way to try to eliminate racial discrimination in this country. But I think
it's just not racial discrimination, but it's eliminate crime.
Right, but I think that I don't know. To me, I'm cautious to tie crime to race because it emboldens racists,
I'm not saying that black people are inherently more violent. That's why they have more crime. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is this: that because we can agree on the premise that poor people commit crimes because they're desperate.
Yeah.
Right? And poor
Right.
people commit more crimes than people who are well off. Right? Because me and you, we don't need to go rob a bank.
Yeah, I mean, I'm. Do you see like poor people and people of color face stereotypes and discrimination in this country, right? And one of those stereotypes that leads to, the discrimination against them, is criminals and tying, crime to race and crime to class, right? So I'm cautious about tying all those things together, right? No, I understand where you're coming from, right? To me, ultimately, the root cause of crime is poverty, right? But that's, low level, low impact crime,
Well, it's not low level, low impact. I mean, it's people robbing banks and robbing, gas stations.
Right.
There's impact.
And how many people are impacted by that? 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe, right?
Well, it's a serious crime. I'm talking about the severity of the crime. It's a serious crime.
It's a serious crime, but when wealthy people commit crimes,
yeah, it has not global, but it has a massive
can destroy
impact.
the nation as it did in 2008,
Definitely,
right?
definitely,
So
definitely.
to me, white collar crime is more impactful than blue collar crime.
Yeah, but
right?
that's not the question. The question is
No,
whether or not.
but yeah. I understand what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but I generally am cautious to tie race to crime and crime to poverty. I understand what you're saying, right? But to me, I don't want to further the stereotypes that already exist in this country. I don't want to embolden racists, really.
Yeah,
to,
neither
to,
do
to,
I.
to say that black people are criminals, right? That is something that I'm
that's not what I'm
vehemently
saying
opposed
either.
to, and I think that we should not talk in that way because it emboldens those stereotypes and it furthers the racial discrimination that occurs in this country.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to talk about, man.
Yeah, because you're like dancing on eggshells.
I'm dancing on eggshells because speaking like as a white person, I know that I don't have the experience that black people have in this country, right? And I do my best to empathize with people of color and make sure that my stances are aligned with the interests of people of color because I feel like that's my responsibility as a white person. I do have white guilt, right? I know that my position in the society is largely based on, position of white people, which is inherently tied to
I think
the
white guilt
oppression-
is a myth.
the oppression of people of color, right?
Yeah, well,
You think it's a myth, right? But I don't know. I'm sorry if I said anything racist, and I
Look, all I'm trying to do in this
Yeah.
is be accurate. That's
accurate, logical.
That's all I'm
I
trying
know,
to do.
I know.
And here's the
Facts
thing.
don't care about your feelings, right?
No. I'm not that. No, I'm not Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro hours.
No, I'm not Ben Shapiro. But
Yeah.
I think the best way to approach any problem is by looking at the evidence and looking at truth, right? And racism exists, and I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it's a terrible thing. I think people being racist over unfairly discriminating against a group is just a bad thing in general. I think most people would agree with me too. But when you're saying I don't want to tie black people and crime together, but I'm going to tie poverty and crime together, right? The problem with that is, well, black people are, as you mentioned, are disproportionately in poverty, right? So that means that we can tie black people, poverty, and crime all together.
Yeah, I mean it's a horrible cycle that occurs in America, and it's an impossible cycle for an individual to face. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So here's the solution,
Right.
Because we're talking about the problem a lot. Let's provide a
Let's
solution.
solve racism.
Let's solve racism right now.
Yeah.
Racism is no more.
Yeah.
Here's what we can do. Poverty causes crime. Black people are poor. Poorer than white people on
Right.
average. Right? Not just poor, sorry. Black people are poorer than white people on average, right?
Yeah,
That's what you mentioned.
Uh-huh.
So,
To no fault of their own.
to no fault of their own, right?
Right.
Exactly. I mean, there's many reasons why people are
Because of
poor.
Institutional racism in this country.
You believe it's institutional racism.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's institutional racism. I think the argument that we've been ever since the Civil War, we've been black people have always been disproportionately unfairly discriminated against. I think we solved that problem in the 1960s after we we desegregated, and I'm looking at I'm trying to find the right words, but we we meshed together black people and white people in the schools and in the jobs, and we desegregated the military. Before that, I think we took all the logical steps that we needed to stop the segregation and stop the racism that was blatant. Right?
But can we agree that racism
exists
still exists
today?
Not
Yes.
just in individuals, not just racist Southerners, but in every aspect of American society.
No, I can't agree that it exists in every aspect of American society. No, I don't believe that. I believe it exists in the individuals who are racist. And here's the other thing: if someone is racist, what happens to them? They get ostracized and they get criticized, right? So we already have a system in place for when racist people speak out and say, "I'm not hiring Mexican people." People are like, "Oh, well, I'm not gonna go to your store and buy your food."
Yeah. All right. Well, let me
pose
it to you from a different.
Let me wrap this up.
Wrap
Wrap this up. Black people are disproportionately impoverished. We can agree on that. And poverty causes crime. So one logical solution is help out those poor areas and not just leave them to rot, right? I think if we increase the amount of funding that goes to these places, it would instantly decrease the crime, right? And try and set these people up with good jobs and try and give them, try and encourage businesses to set up a new factory in the area and try and promote, a good, healthy living, right? So, that's a logical solution to take to reduce crime, right? And to say that, I just don't think it's fair to say that the reason why black people are incarcerated is because of disproportionate amount of racism in the police force. I just don't think that's accurate. It happens for sure, but is it the majority of the time? No, I think people get incarcerated because they do crimes, right? And they're poor because of no fault of their own, right? So one logical step to improving the lives of black people in America and white people is just include more funding to the areas that they're living in and try and set them up with better jobs.
Yeah.
But to say that it's all attributed to institutional racism and that people are all people are just racist in America and that we end up, saying that black people are worse at doing things and so we're not going to hire them for our jobs and whatever they say, that it's wrong because it's there's many factors that play a role, and just to say, "Oh, it's racism," I think is wholly inaccurate.
It's oversimplifying an incredibly nuanced case.
Well, in a dangerous way. I mean, sometimes a simple answer is a good answer unless it's too simple. So I feel like the answer that everyone's racist is just a too simple of an answer.
I mean,
There's so many other factors.
I'm not saying that everyone is blatantly racist, right? But let me pose it to you in a different light, right? So, can we agree that, as of now, people of color are discriminated against, whether it be in every aspect of American life, or just a little bit, just a few cases here and there, right? People of color face racial discrimination in this country. Is that a premise we can agree on, right? Yeah. So, by not vehemently fighting against racial discrimination where we see it, we are, as white people, upholding the institution of white supremacy, right? No, I'm using big Nazi words here. Big Nazi words here. So the situation as of now is disproportionately discriminating against people of color in this country, right? People of color face discrimination, face racial discrimination, right? Whether it be everywhere and every aspect of American life, or it just be a few cases and a few individual, just some bad apples, just some bad cops, right? Wherever it falls on the spectrum, we can agree that it exists, right?
Yeah, well, it
I'm
exists. Not following
your
premise.
No,
really.
just all right. So racial discrimination exists in this country.
Yes,
right.
Very, very small scale.
I think it's large scale, but we disagree. It exists,
yep.
Right? And by not fighting against it, by not speaking out against it, by not, using our vote in our power as an individual to fight against that, we are upholding white supremacy.
Yeah, but that doesn't exist.
No, we're not.
That
we're
doesn't
not,
exist.
We're not
We're not
blatant racists, right?
Sure.
We're not KKK members, right?
But you haven't demonstrated the evidence that we are upholding the standard of racism, right?
Yeah,
you haven't demonstrated that.
So
you haven't demonstrated that
exists.
It exists.
And
sure.
as individuals and collectively, we have the power to try to reduce it.
And we do every day.
The power to eliminate it, right?
Yeah. We ostracize people who are racist because they're not beneficial. They aren't helpful.
Right. So do you think that so I don't know. The point I'm trying to make here is that white people don't have to be blatant KKK racists in order to uphold white supremacy. Simply by not doing anything and not fighting against racial discrimination wherever we see it, not taking an active role in fighting racial discrimination.
Yeah, taking the neutral position.
Taking just adopting the status quo and not doing anything, we are upholding the racist status quo.
Yeah, but you haven't demonstrated
a racist position.
That's right. It is racist. So if you take a neutral position and you say I'm not going to, let's say a cop in my local area beat up a poor black kid, and we all saw it. By me not saying anything and by me not taking any position in it, I'm actually encouraging the cop to beat up more black children because now the police officer knows I can do something and I'll have no consequences. So you're encouraging it. I agree. However, you haven't demonstrated that the scale of this racism that you say exists in America everywhere, it's rampant. You haven't demonstrated that we don't already ostracize those racists, that we are upholding the status quo by not saying anything.
Yeah. So I think that
because it seems like to me
Yeah.
that when a black police officer or when a white police officer beats up a kid, there's protest in the streets. We're actively fighting against it.
Right.
And so
I think that you're focusing too much on individual cases of racism, right? One racist acting in a racist way, right? And we ostracize those people, right? But what I want us as privileged people, as white people, to focus on is institutional racism, the institutions that act in racist ways, right?
So where do you identify that?
Where do I identify that? Well, ultimately, I think that when we talk about race in America, we need to cede ground to people of color, right? We don't experience racial discrimination, right? Because we're white, right? Now there is, discrimination against white people, but not nearly close to the scale of discrimination against people of color in this country, right? So I think that ultimately we need to listen to people of color and, provide backing and help them fight the fight against racism where they identify it.
So you're saying that we as white people can't identify racism?
I mean, we can, right? Ultimately, but we can't do it nearly as well as someone who's experienced it, right? So we need to listen to, believe, hear the stories of people of color in this country where they say there is racial discrimination, right? And I'm white, so I am just sort of repeating the stories that I've heard. But ultimately, when it comes to fighting racism, we need to follow the lead of people of color.
Okay, so you're saying since we're white, we're somewhat blinded to the idea that black people could be disproportionately discriminated against racially.
Yeah.
And since we're white, we don't have the experience, and we're blinded by the idea that there is no racism, right? And so when a black person says that we are being disproportionately, people are being racist towards us, that we need to believe their argument that they are without even accepting any evidence that they are.
I'm saying nothing about evidence.
Well, yeah. I think that's where this whole thing is going is where exactly precisely is the racism in America? Because I don't
it's not
I
something,
see it in the
it's not
small
something
scales.
you can pinpoint. It's not like you can say, "Oh, this guy's racist," and that's racism in America. It's a slow-burning, ever-present thing that exists in America that who rears its ugly head in certain scenarios, right?
Sure, but in order to attack a problem, you have to first identify the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're saying it's slow burning and we can't see it, then we can't attack the problem in the first place.
As white people, it's hard to see it, right? It's hard to see it because we don't experience it, right? But I think that I don't know. I'm. It's hard to talk about, man. I don't know.
It really is.
I don't like. I want to do my best as a white person to fight racism in America.
Me too.
And I think that in order to do that, we need to, I don't know, just believe people of color when they say there's racism. Just the default position is to believe them, right? Because they experience it and we don't.
Yeah, and my default position is I believe you, but you have to demonstrate that it exists, right? And if you can't demonstrate that it exists, then I can't believe you anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally understand your position, right?
And again, I completely admit that there are bad people out there who are racist, like explicitly racist. And and when you say that, as a whole, there's this underlying, ever protruding idea that black people are, lazy or stupid or whatever people say about black people. Those are all wrong, of course. That's just, it's like a little fog that's going around all the institution, the whole America. This fog that black people are, whatever. That it exists. There's this fog. Well, you haven't identified that it actually exists, and so I can't. Yeah, I mean, so my default position is
I can't identify it.
Yeah,
I don't experience it, right? Because I'm white.
Yeah, and
I don't experience that. So I just say I default to the people of color who dedicate their lives to fighting racism.
That's right.
I dedicate my, I cede the position to Black Lives Matter activists or the civil rights activists or W.E. Du Bois or Booker T. Washington or Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all the people that have dedicated their lives to fighting racism. I cede the position to them, and where they say there is racism, my default position is to believe them, right?
Yeah. So let's take another. Let me try and draw an analogy here. So let's say there's murder. Okay. Let's say that there's a rumor that spread that this person murdered someone. What's the default position?
The default position, well, you're going to say that everyone's innocent until proven guilty, right?
No, well, yes, I am going to say that, but
yeah.
But I mean, what's the default position initially?
Right.
He committed the murder.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's generally our tendency as humans. That's in part of human nature, is that when you hear something and it fits with your preconceived notion of that person,
then it's true.
Then you have a tendency.
Exactly.
To believe
so
it, right?
you believe it, right? And so with the racism, if black people say that they're unfairly discriminated against, I believe it. Yeah, sure. Okay. Now, what's the second step? There's murder. It exists. Okay. Now we have to look at all the evidence and try and figure out if the murder actually took place and if this person is guilty of murder. Okay. Then it has to be demonstrated that he did commit the murder. And that's done through evidence, right? And if you don't have any evidence, then you can't convict the person of murder just off a hearsay. And so draw that back to racism. There are white people in America who discriminate unfairly against black people. That'd be the murder, discrimination. Okay, I believe they are. Now it has to be demonstrated that they do actually do it, and when that's demonstrated, then we can convict the person of murder or solve the problem. Yeah. But until I'm convinced that there actually is a problem, then I can't rationally believe that black people are unfairly discriminated against. I've already identified that they are sometimes unfairly discriminated against. That it does happen.
Yeah.
With black police officers beating up white police officers beating up black kids. Like that's blatantly wrong. But to say that the whole institution itself is corrupted by racism, you have to first demonstrate that it exists. You have to identify it, and then after that, then we can solve it.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So
do you see what I'm saying?
No, I definitely.
I think it's pretty. I think it's reasonable.
Yeah. No, it's very reasonable, and it's a good position to take. what? So I don't know. I kind of want to stop talking about race because I feel kind of icky talking about it. Like I know it's something we need to talk about, but I just feel like it's not my place, right? Because I frankly don't know what I'm talking about, and I
me too.
I want to acknowledge that I'm sorry, if I said anything bad
well, let me also put this here too. We both are very
we're ignorant.
Ignorant, that's for sure.
Ignorant, yeah,
ignorant.
Like we don't know what we're talking about.
That's for sure.
And like obviously, like no one listens to this podcast.
No one listens to this
30,
podcast.
30 views, everyone. So it's not really that important what we're saying, but I don't want to. Most importantly, I don't want to further racist stereotypes, right?
Yeah,
I
me too.
I don't want to further ideas that end up harming people of color in this country. So I think that, like you said, right, that in order to, believe that there is rampant racial discrimination in this country, we need to look at evidence, right? And so if you believe that, right, I think that it's important to dedicate a lot of your time to looking at evidence, right? Watching movies or documentaries like, the 13th Amendment. That's a good one, which is about racial discrimination in America's prison system. Or, reading the works of and listening to, Black civil rights activists, throughout America's history. W.E. Du Bois is a good one that I've read.
Yeah.
He's a really, intelligent.
Yeah, and all those people showed that there was this demonstration.
Evidence, right? And that's that evidence that you're talking about, right? But I think that Americans are lazy, and Americans, a very small percentage of Americans are willing to dedicate, hours every week to researching and looking at the evidence of clear racial discrimination, institutional racism in this country, and by saying that only when we see clear evidence do we act. Only when we see the writing on the wall do we do something. Encourages and upholds the racist status quo. You know what I mean? Like you're an intellectually sound guy, right? And you enjoy the pursuit of truth, right? And you want to see the evidence before you act on it, right? But the thing is, most Americans aren't like that. Most Americans will just believe the thing that's easiest for them to believe and just succumb to the easy, cushy status quo, which is often, when it comes to white Americans, that, it doesn't exist, right? Where, racism is not legally enshrined anymore. We got rid of segregation in the 60s. We're done with it. It's all good. Just ignore it, right? I'm fine. I'm going to keep living my cushy white life, right? So by, I don't know, making it a stipulation to act against racism, that you need to dedicate your own personal free time to looking at evidence and reading about evidence, furthers that status quo.
Because
right?
most people won't.
Most people won't, and
Sure.
they will continue to.
That's very reasonable.
And continue to ignore it and continue to, not act on it.
Yeah, that's
right.
very reasonable. But what I think important.
It's intellectually sound. Right?
It is definitely.
It's
definitely.
very intellectually sound. Your point. But my
point. Thank you.
Yeah, your point is intellectually sound, right? That we need to see clear evidence before we act on it.
Yeah.
But when speaking about America realistically, Americans are lazy, and Americans don't do well thought out research before coming to a conclusion. They will come to the conclusion that is easiest to them, that makes them feel guiltless and free, and allows them to continue the life that they have been living without worry. Right?
Definitely. But I think it's also important that if let's say the solution would be move all. Well, I won't even propose a solution. Mm-hmm. But if you talk about a massive change in the American lifestyle, then it'd be necessary to have evidence before you make that massive change.
Yeah. Oh, definitely,
right?
definitely.
So yeah.
So I think that when talking about evidence, right, and you and I both agree that in order for affluent white people to put aside their own time and their welfare in order to fight the monster of racism in this country, they need to be educated with the evidence that it exists and it harms people and it is a horrible, horrible thing. I think that we shouldn't give that burden to adults that have already, lived a comfortable life and are opposed to changing their lifestyle and, putting aside their time in order to fight this. I think that we should include, education and evidence of the racial and institutional racism in this country in early education, right? That we learn in elementary school. Look at this. This is clear evidence of racism in this country. And on the one hand,
I think we do that already, though, don't we?
I mean, we have Black History Month and we all learn about Martin Luther King, but we don't really, we don't get shown documentaries about America's prison system and how it is racist, and we don't get shown videos of police brutality. We don't get, we don't read, good books about racial. We read To Kill a Mockingbird, right? But that's a piece of fiction, right? It doesn't really address. It might address and it might further the cause of fighting against racism, and it does show how America's justice system is positioned to discriminate against people of color in this country. But I think that we should read more about it and more blatant examples of it, right?
Yeah.
We should read the works of Malcolm X and W.E.B. Du Bois, because I think that those are works that speak directly about racism in America, shows evidence, and
well,
I don't know.
I certainly agree too.
Yeah.
Like, if I'll try and be brief here because this is conversation. I think we should wrap up soon.
Yeah.
But I think we do a pretty good job already. That doesn't mean that we're doing the best job. We can always improve that. But we have some talk about the problems that America faced with race throughout our American history, which is a lot. We had a lot of problems with race. So one step that we could take to improving the perception of how to respond to people of different colors of you is to look at our history. And so I think we do an okay job. We study the Little Rock Nine. We study To Kill a Mockingbird. We talk about, or at least I did in my education, we talk about how there was a civil war and that it was fought and, and the North won. We talk about how the racism in the South was fundamentally a bad thing and that we should not continue that. And so I think we learn a bit about it.
A bit, right. But I think that, I don't know, my criticism of America's racial history education, right, is that it whitewashes it in a way that, we learn about the Trail of Tears and we learn about, the ever-present racial discrimination in this country. But I don't think that we teach kids to apply it to now enough, right? We sort of teach the history of racism in this country as if it's just history, right? And we don't teach it as if it is something that impacts the lives of people of color today, right? And so I think that that's a link that we need to emphasize, right? That listen, the Trail of Tears and the genocide of Native Americans in this country is not just history. It is not just something that has happened and that we're done with. It is something that continues to impact Native Americans in this country, and it continues to, further that process of genocide, and it is not ended, right? And we have not overcome racism in the 60s, right? Martin Luther King did not solve the problem of racism. Now he made significant steps in that direction, but I think that it's I don't know, a key to education of racial history in America is emphasizing that it's not over, right? These patterns that we've seen throughout American history, that people of color are discriminated against, they are hurt, the state engages in violence against them, it continues today, right? There is a pattern of racism in American history, and it has not ended. We've not overcome that part of our history. It is still very much a part of everyday American life.
Yeah, and my position would be I think it's overblown.
Yeah.
Right? And just in summary here, I think it's drastically overblown. I think it has the purpose behind it is to the purpose of by trying to say that there's institutional racism, that the everyday workings of the American system is inherently racist. What it's trying to do is it's trying to discourage people from believing that No, that's a bad point.
Mm-hmm.
In summary, I just don't see that there is enough evidence that the American system is inherently corrupted by racism today.
Mm-hmm.
It was previously, and I think we've gotten over it. But I don't think that I have. I still, as a white person, I have a guilt in that I have to provide what? I guess provide.
Yeah, but so let me pose you a question.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
What's the harm in it? Is there any downside to saying that America is a racist country, right? And there is institutional racism in every single institution in America, right? I know that I'm speaking in absolute terms here, right? But what's the downside of that? It might encourage more white people to engage in the fight against racism and support people of color in that fight. Where's the downside?
Well, the downside would be it would cost a lot of money, first off, because, it sounds like you're advocating for repercussions. We committed crimes in the past, and you guys have been held back, right, from progressing in society since the Civil War. And it would take a lot of money just to be given to the people who were unfairly discriminated against. It would cost a lot of money, first off. Number two, it would be, if it was true that we somehow are still unfairly discriminating against black people in this country, that we should provide them with adequate resources. I agree. I agree. Yeah. But what would be the downside? It'd be at the cost of the truth. Of the situation.
Yeah, but so was that not something that you were advocating for earlier? That
the metaphor,
no,
literal metaphor.
We in order to fight crime, that we should provide funding to impoverished communities. Is that not in line with the I don't know. To me,
I haven't even considered what would the downsides actually be. And I'd have to think about it, because there certainly would be downsides, but would it be ultimately more beneficial for everyone if we just said that there are no downsides, and that if we continue, what we're doing, that black people of color will continually be disproportionately discriminated against or whatever. Again, my position really is this, that racism exists in individuals, and people who are individually racist will be ostracized and will be not, a part of the community anymore. And so I think we already do fight that. Can we do a better job? Probably. But is racism inherent in every system in America? I don't believe it. And I think it's based off of, so let me bring this up. So there was a little study. I know I said we'd get off of it, but there's a sociologists are trying to have implicit bias training, which basically says that everyone has this implicit bias or implicit racism towards people of color, towards whatever, and we need to retrain their brain to believe that they don't have to believe that racism does exist, and that we need to change how people think. And so Starbucks implemented this, for one, but there's no evidence that this implicit racism actually does exist in people. So, I mean, but I think that's aside from the tribalism part.
Once more, when it comes to,
and I'm kind of running out of brain here, and my arguments are getting worse and worse as we go.
Me too, man. Once again, I've said it 100 times, but I feel cautious about talking about race, because as a white person, I know I do have implicit biases, like you were saying, but I want to use the platform to further the fight against racism in America. And sometimes that means talking in absolutes where there aren't absolutes, right? But if inflating a truth means that we dismantle racism a little more, I'm willing to do it, right? But once again, when we're talking about evidence of implicit bias, right? We as white people, we're not the ones that are affected by it, and therefore our experience of it and our where we see that evidence is much less important than where people of color experience it, right? Like if people of color say that, yeah, Starbucks is racist, I get treated worse in Starbucks than I see white people are treated. I think that is what they experience, and I think that it is sort of we should default to believing that, right? Because we don't experience it, so we can't speak directly on it, and it is, we're not the ones that experience it, so we should default to believing those that do experience it, right?
Yeah, and I do default to believing them, but again, after the belief, I have to be convinced.
Yeah, we need evidence, right? Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like we talked about it.
We talked about it.
It's just such a difficult conversation,
man.
because it's like, how much do I say that is based off of just where I grew up and how I grew up?
Yeah,
and
Yeah, and I'm sure we said some racist stuff in here. I mean, if we listen back to it, I'm sure we made some false equivalences, about race and poverty, or race and crime and all that sort of stuff. And I want to apologize for that. And I just hope that you guys know that we think we have the best intentions, right? We think that we're doing our best to fight against racism, which we both agree is a
bad problem.
Bad problem, and we have different positions on it. It's extremity, how extreme it is here in America, but I don't know. I just want to do my best to be an ally to
well, I think it's also
be a part of the fight against racism. And I don't know.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's also important to recognize that we are not advocating for racism at all. What we're advocating for,
but I'm sure that we've said some subtly racist things, right? Just because,
I don't know.
We're talking about race.
That's right.
White people,
That's right.
And
it's a delicate subject for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Yeah, but
sorry guys.
sorry. But again, Eric and I are not racist people. Like, I can speak for myself.
Right.
I'm not racist.
No, I mean, we don't think that we're racist, but I don't think that's that's not something you can self-diagnose.
Well, I mean, I'm not advocating for going back to the 1960s.
Yeah.
In fact, I think.
I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of racists that do outright say that they are racist, right?
Yeah.
But I think that most racism is unintended, and it is.
Sure, but we can say we are intending this conversation to be understanding what's happening in America with race. Right? That's really what we're trying to do. Is we're just trying to understand each other's positions on race.
Yeah, and I think that we should really talk about it with not white people. Having a conversation about race, between two white dudes is pretty fruitless conversation. You know what I mean? Because we don't have the experiences necessary to really back up what it feels like to be a person of color in America. So we got to get some people of color onto the podcast and talk about it. Yeah.
But our intentions are just this. I think I could speak for both of us. Is that we just want to know what's true, right? We both just want to know what's true.
We want to know it's true, but I feel like that truth is we're not able to find that truth because we're both white. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
we don't know what it's like to be a person of color in America. I try my best to listen to the stories of people of color and empathize and sympathize with those situations. And to me, it seems like people of color say that America is a racist country and that, racism rears its ugly head all over America, right? Not just in the blatant cases of, white police officers beating people of color, but, subtle cases of racism as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm talking in circles. I don't know.
Talking in circles. Let's just move on. Let's just move on.
What do you want to talk about now?
We could talk about coronavirus. No, we could talk about labor because that's a big problem currently.
Yeah.
6.6 million unemployed people filing for unemployment. It's pretty scary stuff, man. So what do you think is going to be the labor changes after this is all said and done? Because there's certainly going to be labor changes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. At this point, I'm very discouraged about the American labor movement. The American labor has been inundated with capitalist propaganda saying that, unions are against their own interests and that, capitalism is the only way to go forward and that any other system would destroy all the wealth that we have in this country. So I'm not very hopeful. I want to be optimistic, but looking back at America's past, like if we look at the Great Depression as an example, and it feels like we're entering another similar period, right? Roosevelt saved capitalism, right? And a lot of liberals, right, love to hold up Roosevelt, that he's, he is the model of what every democratic president should be like, right? He saved everybody. He's
his New Deal plans. Awesome,
were God-given, right? But if you look at, what was happening in the Great Depression, communism and socialism had a real chance of succeeding. The Communist Party in America had over 2 million members.
That
right?
was crazy,
right? And various socialist parties were making serious moves that they were able to look at and identify that, listen, it's not working, right? The system that we have is fundamentally broken, right? Look around you. Nobody has jobs, yet all of the infrastructure needed to create those jobs are still in place, right? Why do the American laborers have to suffer for the bad choices of the people that own this country, right? They were the ones that caused this problem. Why are we the ones that bear the brunt of it, right? That was a big conversation that was happening in the Great Depression. But when Roosevelt came in and saved capitalism with, tons of government subsidies, he stopped that movement. He stopped the, left-wing progress that was taking place in America at the time. And, we dove into World War II, and all left-wing fervor was drained in the war effort, right? All talk of social progress and, revamping our economy took a second place to
wartime
patriotism, right? That we're America, and we got to stand for what we stand for, right? And I don't know. I think that the same thing is probably going to happen again. That right now there is a wave of leftism in America. The American worker is waking up to the system is rigged, right? And it's rigged against us, and we cannot. The more time we allow to go by, the worse it's going to get. We're not going to be saved by the Democrats. We're not going to be saved by the Republicans. They are in bed with the people that own this country, and they're going to continue to uphold the system that benefits those people that own the country. And people are really waking up to that, right? And, we have an opportunity right now to overturn that unjust system, right? We have an opportunity to really change it, right? Because when you have that mass realization that the system is wrong, right, and it hurts us, we need to change it. You have the opportunity to change that system. But if the government comes in again and swoops in and saves us, right, saves the economy, saves the businesses, I fear that fervor will decline, right, and we will lose the will to fight for a better society, and we will lose the will to, improve our country for the majority. I don't know. That's a good point. I'm not making good points here.
No, it's a great point, Eric.
But
yeah, well, I think what really saved the economy when we had the economic downturn in 1929 was military and the putting people back in jobs. The New Deal was a good plan. It worked, but it had its flaws, and that was really the start of the American debt, which we've been continuing up to today. And the New Deal, while it did work, the thing that brought us out of the Depression was actually the war and the increase in manufacturing. So, and after that, we continued the capitalist structure because that was what was in place, which was manufacturing jobs. People get jobs at the factories, and they work and they make a wage. I'm curious to what you think about what's going to happen after the coronavirus, because instead of people going to work and getting out of the Depression by the increase in increase of labor, what do you think is going to happen as a result of the decrease of labor? That instead of the worker going back to jobs is going to take us out of a depression or a recession or whatever, it's the people not taking jobs. So what do you think? I feel like this would be a huge boost to socialism, right? Or social labor. The labor has some say over in his job and his position.
Yeah.
I feel like this would be the time where unions, where all the systems in place to increase the life of the laborer would thrive because the labor is, well, I mean, although they're getting fired, this would be a good time for the labor to demand certain regulations on business practices.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I think that if we had robust, united leftist organizations in this country, we would have the power to do that, right? If the DSA or the Communist Party or any sort of other, leftist organization that has the goal of furthering the lives of the working people of this country, if they had the logistics in the organization in order to, engage in a mass strike or, really change the fundamental wrongs that exist in this country, then we could do it, right? But I think that the problem is that we're too splintered, too disorganized, and there's no overarching umbrella for leftist organizing here in America right now. So until an organization and a movement rises up and engages in the sort of activism and social disruption that it'll take to get these changes that we want to change, it's largely not going to happen because we you and I can both agree that neither party, wants any sort of fundamental change in the economy, right? The Democrats take the more left-wing position than the Republicans, but fundamentally the Democrats are just as much in bed with the oligarchs of this country as the Republicans.
Yeah,
they are just as invested in the current system that we have now because that system gave them their power, and they are indebted to the people that gave them that power, largely wealthy donors, right? So there's no hope in the Democratic Party. There's no way, Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein are going to, become revolutionaries and try to overturn capitalism as we know it, right?
Yeah. I hate the Democratic Party, man.
Yeah, as do I, man. But yeah, so there's no way that's going to happen. But I don't know. I really am I want to be hopeful, right? I want to think that the American people now have the awareness to go out into the street and demand change. But the thing about this specific situation is that we have the coronavirus and people
we can't go outside.
Yeah, people aren't willing to get together in a large group and go burn down some banks. Like that's just not that's not going to happen really. So I don't know. Maybe once the coronavirus subsides, we enough people will be out of work, and enough people will see the fundamental wrongs of the system that we have in place that they will be, revved up with revolutionary fervor enough to go out and demand some real change.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know.
No,
I really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and
well, there's a lot of
I'm cautious
speculation
to make any big
assumptions,
big assumptions or big proclamations, but I'm not hopeful. I'm pessimistic. I think that it's just going to continue the way it has for hundreds of years now. And
yeah, well, and here's
and the systems in place are just going to continue to work the way they have. The oligarchy is going to hold on to the power, and
So I've been looking at some graphs.
Yeah.
Oh. I've been looking at some graphs.
Yeah.
Of the Dow Jones Index in 1929, the Nasdaq, and the .com recession. And today, and I didn't because I'm trying to do option trading, which is risky as anything. But I'm trying to make some big bucks, make some big moves. So I laid over the graphs, right, and the .com recession, and today almost lines up exactly, right. So to people who are listening, which is probably very few of you.
Shout out to you guys.
Shout out to you.
We
made it at this point. 2 hours 13 minutes in.
Yeah.
Look at the graphs and buy some put options. So that's what I've been trying to do is buy put options. I'm trying to short the market. I'm trying to say, these companies are all going to fail, so I'm going to buy a bunch of stocks to options to sell 100 shares later. So I mean, yeah, right now and from what this is what I was going to talk about. From the graph of the 1929 and today, the the graph is almost identical.
Mhm.
It almost lines up perfectly.
Mhm.
And so if we continue where we are, we might have a massive, massive depression. First off, because we don't have, well, I mean, you could just look around. So many businesses are shutting down. A ton of businesses are done face to face, like restaurants, retail. They're all halted. They're not doing anything, and most of them don't have the funds to shut down the business for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. We've really flipped a switch in America from the on to the off with our businesses, and tons of businesses are going to fail as a result of this. And so we could be in for a very long depression. And the unemployment really speaks for itself too. 6.6 million people unemployed. That's going to have long-lasting effects on tons of businesses.
Yeah.
Because people can't pay their bills. They're not going to go out and buy a $10 burrito.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
So we could be in for a very long depression.
Yeah. And
which is scary.
It's very scary. And I mean, we're lucky enough that we aren't going to be, part of the group that's most affected by this, right? We live in Scripturance, right? We got a cushion of wealth to protect us from the immediate downturn of the economy, right? But yeah, like once again, looking at the pattern of capitalism, right? When the economy is doing well, the people that own the economy are doing great, right? And the people that fuel the economy, people that are the gasoline in the engine, are doing okay. Like they're struggling, right? As is evidenced, over the last 8 years, we've had steady economic growth, but the American people, the American worker, still suffered as in general, right? People struggled to pay their bills. People went bankrupt. People, got their savings tanked by a hospital bill, right? People are loaded with student debt, right? As a whole, the American working class was not thriving. But now when capitalism fails, when we enter another depression, when we enter another recession, it is the American worker that has been fueling this growth that ultimately bears the brunt of the recession. It is the hardworking cashiers, the hardworking janitors, the truck drivers that are going to be hurt by this recession, and the people that own this country are largely going to come out fine, right? They might lose a lot of money, right? They might lose, 10 million of their $1 billion net worth, right? But ultimately, their material quality of life won't be affected. They're still going to have food on their table. They're still going to have their houses. They're still going to drive their cars, and they won't be materially hurt that much. And to me, that's just the cycle of capitalism, right? That there's a bubble, right? That the economy grows, and everybody seems to be doing well, right? The people that own this country are doing great, right? But the people that fuel the country, the fuel the economy, don't do well, right? They get hurt by the institutions that drain them of their money. They get hurt by bill collectors. They get hurt by landlords. They get hurt by their bosses. And then when it all comes crashing down, they're the ones that get hurt the most. And the government comes in and they bail out the people that already have too much, and they're not the ones that will really be hurt. And that's just what's going to continue to happen forever, unless we change the fundamental structure of the economy. That's just the cycle. That's what happens, right?
Yeah. And it's happened in history many times, and it's happened in America many times too. But I don't really understand what would be the solution to trying to overturn the cycle of when an economic downturn happens. The rich end up they lose money, but they end up sustaining themselves by government bailouts, which has happened time and time again. And it's happening now, right? With a $2 trillion deal, there's so many companies that are going to be applying for a bailout.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what would be the solution to try and overturn what you would call the status quo of these businesses end up benefiting and losing some of their material wealth, but the individual, your average Joe truck driver ends up losing a lot of material wealth.
And not just losing material wealth, but
jobs.
They suffer, right?
Yeah.
They engage in suffering, right? I don't know. I don't really have any clear-cut answer to that question because it's an incredibly hard question.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately, one thing that we can fix when it comes to bailing out the economy is giving money to the people that are most affected, right? And instead of giving businesses a blank check, right? Here's $1 million. Do what you want with it. That we directly fund the lost jobs of the employees, right? And this is something that many European countries have implemented, right? So in the UK, for example, the government. So if a business is about to fire an employee as a result of the economic downturn, the government steps in and says, "Listen, we'll pay 80% of that employee's wage as long as you keep them technically as an employee of the company. You don't have to have them come in and work. You could if you want, but we will provide that salary, that wage, as so that job is kept." Right, and that company still has the ability and the resources and the infrastructure to continue to provide whatever good or service it provides. Right, so instead of just giving money to the companies, right, we give money directly to the employees that will be hurt by this economic downturn, and thereby allowing the company to tap that labor if they require it. Right,
Are we somewhat doing that right now? By giving money to the labor, but we're also giving money to
so we're giving a one-time payment of $1,200 to all individuals,
which
right?
wouldn't even pay for our grocery bill here.
No, and instead, when it comes to paying money to businesses, we're just giving money directly to businesses, and not. I mean, there is some oversight to how that money is spent. For example, stock buybacks are banned for the period of the loan. But it doesn't go directly to the employees that will be heavy hit.
Only $1,200 does.
Yeah, only $1,200, and of course we're boosting unemployment payments, in response to the massive amount of people that are filing for unemployment. But I think that we cannot avoid this situation under capitalism. Like it's something that is woven into the fabric of our economic system, right? And it's not something that can be patched up with small fixes and small legislation. I think fundamentally it's about taking power from those that hold it now, which are the wealthy, and giving that power to the people that fuel the economy, right? And that means democratizing every single institution in this country, right? And I think that ultimately, if companies are run for the benefit of the people that are affected by the decisions of that company, those companies will be much more reluctant to hurt the people that elect them. Right. Yeah. A board of directors, if elected by the employees, they will be much more reluctant to just fire a bunch of people because they know that they will get voted out. Yeah. In the next election, and they will be more ready to, hold on to those employees, maintain those jobs, right? And obviously, the fundamental structure of a company needing money, and if business declines, they won't be able to, pay for the cost of that business. That won't change, right? And so in that case, I think that, the government would still need to bail out these institutions, but I don't know. I don't really have a nuanced solution.
Sure. Because there's so many factors that are here, and to address every one of them would take hours.
Yeah. But I just see it as fundamentally immoral, right?
Yeah. Me too. So
I'm running out of juice here.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah. But I talked about my neighbor, right, Mr. Rob, who got fired the day before he was going to receive $1 million check. I think really what we're trying to defend against is a rigged system, right? If we believe that the system is rigged in some way against you, then you want to change it because it's a rigged system. But if you believe that it's fine, it's fair, and it's whatever, then you don't want to change it. So I think where the fundamental issue lies is in trying to show people that the system is actually genuinely rigged against you in some ways.
Yeah.
And and that's really where the solution to the problem of capitalism lies, is by firing up enough people to change the system.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's sort of a feeling that most Americans have, right? If you ask most Americans, most of them will say, yeah, politicians are corrupt, the system is rigged, right? But the problem really lies in that they don't have an avenue to express that dissatisfaction, right? The Republican Party and the Democratic parties don't offer any sort of real change, any fundamental change. So we're not able to express that dissatisfaction electorally, right? And I think that was one big factor in the election of Trump, is that the working class people of this country are fed up with the status quo. They don't like what is happening, right? And Trump seemed to provide an alternative to that. Drain the swamp, right? We're going to get rid of those corrupt politicians. Now, did he? Absolutely not. But he provided an avenue for American workers to supposedly change the system, to unrig the economy, to make it work for the people instead of the rich again, right? Now, were they misled? I believe so. Trump is a billionaire whose wealth is built off of the backs of working people. Obviously, he's not going to fundamentally undermine what got him that wealth in that first place, right? But I think that really, I don't know. I see two paths going forward, right? One path is allowing the American working people to express their dissatisfaction electorally, where they are allowed to vote in people that agree with them, that see that the system is rigged, that are willing to fight to change the system, and essentially allowing people to express that dissatisfaction in the voting box, right? Or it's going to continue on, and the American worker is going to continue to be oppressed and taken advantage of, and continue to live in this rigged system. And now it could just continue on and on and on forever. And nothing's going to change. Yep. The rich are just going to continue to get richer and richer and richer, and the American people are going to continue to suffer, right? Or there's going to be a violent change, right? Where unless given an electoral avenue to express their dissatisfaction, the American people are going to take that option into their own hands. They're going to strike out wherever they see the opportunity. They are going to, take it into their own hands. Wherever they see corruption, wherever they see a rigged system, they're going to strike out against it directly, right? And I think that certainly is an option for changing the economy and changing the fundamental system, but I think that it will lead to a lot of unnecessary suffering. And so I think that if the American people aren't given an electoral option, they're going to take it into their own hands, and that's going to lead to a lot of unnecessary suffering. Some might call it necessary, right? In order to fundamentally change the system, things need to change, and people need to have their wealth revoked, right?
Well, there's going to be a lot of changes that come after this whole thing blows over,
I mean,
right? Because,
I hope so.
Yeah, well, I'm a firm believer that we're going to go into a full-on depression. From what I've looked at so far, it seems likely that this economic downturn is going to continue for at least another year, 2 years, maybe, right? And so that's why I'm buying put options. So after the whole depression, which I believe is going to happen, ends, I think the massive realization people are going to have is I have no position of power at my job at all.
Yeah.
Like zero position of power.
Yeah.
And I was watching a video the other day of this New Yorker who was a union organizer, and there were people who were a part of the union, and there was the CEO of the company, and this guy was just tearing him a new one. He was basically just yelling and shouting at the guy for not giving his truckers proper pay or something of that sort, and he was arguing with them, and the other guy was listening to his position, and he had the ability to demand things, and the labor, the truck drivers, I'm sure ended up benefiting. And they were all sitting at a table. They all had cigars and coffee. It was cool, and the laborers actually had a position that they could say, hey, you guys are not paying us enough, or we're working these long hours. and we want higher pay. And they actually had a position. And
Yeah.
if you don't, we'll strike.
Yeah.
But at the end of this, the whole coronavirus thing, I think the laborers are going to recognize that we just got fired just out of the blue. You know, and we thought we'd have a steady job for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Now I'm laid off.
Yeah.
I had no say in my laying off, and no one else had any say in their laying off. And my position of my position in the workplace could be swept out from underneath me in a moment, in 3 months' time, really.
Yeah.
And so they're going to recognize that we don't have any position of power in our jobs, and that was mainly because of the continuation of when the unions were busted up. What was that, 20s or something? 1920s, 1930s?
I mean, it's been happening
For a very long
throughout
time.
American history, right?
But
They were strongest in like the early 20s.
early 20s, yeah. But
Early 20s.
it got busted up soon after that. But yeah, and so I think what's really going to happen is when, and I'm speaking, this is just me taking a shot in the dark, but I think at the end of this, the laborers are going to recognize that we don't have any position of power, that I can get fired from my job whenever it's convenient for my CEO to fire me.
Yeah.
Right. That we need to have some position in my workplace, and that my labor that I do in my job is valuable, and that I can use that valuable labor as a way of leverage against my employer, and I should do that. And so I think we're going to see after this is over a rise in unions and a rise in labor movements.
Yeah. I hope so.
And you know, like, and who knows where this will all take us. You know, and who knows if the U.S. economy will even continue as it is after this. Like, this is going to be a massive change in the American economic system.
Yeah.
And also the federal system, the government, and its role it has in the United States economy. And, you know, there's really no definite answer, but there's only estimations. My estimation is this, that at the end of this, there's going to be labor movements, there's going to be a rise of unions, and that there's going to be an increase in the demands of the laborers for what they get.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know you would be happy to see that for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely be happy to see that, but I don't know. I'm just real
pessimistic,
depressed and pessimistic, bro. Like, I mean, I hope that's what happens. You know, I would love for the American working class to rise up and demand equal treatment and an unrigged system. But I don't know. The state is powerful, and the oligarchs are even more powerful, and they're going to use every tool in their toolbox to curtail that. You know, the police are going to come in and they're going to bust up unions. The police are going to, you know, break up protests as they did in the Occupy Wall Street protests. You know, I mean, if it gets too far, the National Guard is going to be called in, and, you know, martial law is going to be imposed, and people are going to be stuck in their houses. You know, and
which I also think is likely. By the way.
I mean, I think that the state is so powerful, you know, and,
It is.
and we, you know, we like to believe that here in America, you know, we have all these individual freedoms, and, you know, the state allows us to express those individual freedoms. However, when we want to express those freedoms in a way that threatens the power of the ruling class, they will become totalitarian. You know, the state will enforce the status quo. The state will crack down on the worker. You know, if it means killing a couple people, they've done it before, right?
Pinkertons,
and I mean, even, you know, Kent State during the Vietnam War, right?
Kent State.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just feel, you know, we're living through some real historical times, right? Like this year and this period of time is going to be in textbooks for 100 years from now, and I don't know. I'm just very unsteady. I don't know what to feel. You know, I want to feel hopeful, but you're looking back at the, you know, American history. Every time we've had an opportunity, we've squandered it, and the state and the oligarchy comes out on top, and we, you know, maintain the status quo. But I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just real iffy about everything. I don't know what to feel, and
yeah, maybe that's the. You're not being necessarily pessimistic. You're just being realistic, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're looking at history, like when there's been a massive massive, economic downturn
Mhm.
or something of that sort,
Mhm.
the things that change are very few.
Mhm.
It's usually just we lost a ton of money. Let's continue the system.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's no real fundamental evaluation if that system is okay, right? Because those that control this country, importantly control the media, don't want that conversation to happen, and they're going to ostracize any voice that wants to engage in that conversation and wants to question the fundamental morality of a system that allows the rich to benefit off the backs of the poor. They're gonna use every tool in their toolbox, and right now they control all the institutions, and the only thing we have is our labor, right? The only thing that we have is our bodies, right? And bodies in the streets, and the ability to engage in social disruption, and the American education system has not taught us how to organize. It is discouraged us from engaging in any sort of mass movement. I mean, to quickly do a comparison, like if we compare France and America, anytime any sort of decision is made that negatively affects a group in France, they strike. They go into the streets and they burn shit down. Like the
oh man.
like Macron decided to reduce the pension benefits of firefighters, right? By a small amount, by like 1%. And all the firefighters in the country went into the streets and started fighting cops, right?
Oh my
Like they
goodness.
got bats and they just started bashing cops, right?
Jeez.
And that's because that's what's been taught throughout French history, is that when we don't like something, we go into the streets and we rise up, right? That's how we got the Republic in the first place.
Cut off the Queen's head.
Right? Yeah, we're gonna start chopping heads. Get the guillotines out, boys. Right? Like that is what the French people have been taught. Is that that's how we get change, is by going into the streets and demanding it. And those in power are gonna have to deal with it, right? And then here in America, we're so repressed and so cautious to make any sort of real moves against those in power that we say, oh, let's be cautious, right? Let's not get arrested, right? We can't do anything too drastic, right? We gotta, let the electoral system work it all out, and I'm sure democracy will come in and save us. And we trust those in power. They're looking out for our best interests, and we're so cautious to go to the streets and fight for the changes that we want to see, and the education system has only furthered that, right? Looking it, when we teach American history in our schools, we don't really teach it through the perspective of mass movements. We teach it through the perspective of influential leaders, right? When talking about the civil rights movement, for example, we teach it through the lens of Martin Luther King, right? And he was an influential figure, and I don't want to demean him in any sort of way. But by teaching that it was Martin Luther King, right, who overturned, the legalized racism in our country, ignores and diminishes the fact that, well, no, it was the fact that millions of people went to the streets and fought to change it, right? It was the bodies and the wills of millions of individuals getting together and deciding that we've had enough of this, right? Instead, they paint it through the perspective of, well, it was this one great speaker and one great leader that was able to incite all this change, right? But without the mass movement to back that change, it never would have been put into place.
I never even considered that.
Right. Like, so I think that, the American people are discouraged from engaging in mass movements, engaging in social disruption. If anybody proposed, hey, let's block some highways, right? Let's stop the system from functioning, right? Let's blow up train tracks, right? And let's engage in the social disruption that we're able to engage in. Everyone would say, you can't do that. That's too radical, right? You can't engage in violence in order to get your means across, right? And I'm not necessarily advocating for that, right?
Not necessarily.
Right? Don't blow up train tracks, guys. But I think that, yeah, we are discouraged from engaging in mass popular movements, because it threatens those in power, and those in power, know that they skate on thin ice, right? And that if the people wake up, and if the people realize that they have the power to overturn everything, right? If everybody in America stopped working, a mass strike, stopped paying rent, the whole system would crumble within weeks, and they would not be able to hold on to their power, right? If everybody stops working, the cops aren't enough, right? They can't force everybody back to work, right? We have the power to fundamentally change everything in America, but because we're discouraged from doing so, and because we're taught that we can't do it, and that it would, the negative consequences of doing that outweigh the positive consequences, I feel pessimistic about it. I think that if the American workers wake up and realize that we have the power to change everything, right? It's in our hands, right? We hold the power, but we've been lied to, and we've been told that those at the top have the power. We need to look for a congressperson to be our savior, right? And we need to look for, billionaire philanthropists to save this world. That's the sort of point of view that is perpetrated by the American education system and the American media. I don't know. I'm losing track of what I'm saying.
I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah,
we have the power, but we've been taught that we don't.
Yeah,
we've been taught that we don't have the power, and that by utilizing that power, we're going to hurt everybody. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pessimistic about it.
No, I agree. I mean, there's reasons to be pessimistic, and there's reasons to be optimistic too. But
I just hope that we are the generation that can change it.
Yeah. Well, and it. What we're really looking for is better lifestyles. That's it. And one way that we could have a better lifestyle is by having a more safe job, a more certain job, that I'll have the certitude. Is that a word? I'll have the certainty of a paycheck. Right. I'll have the certainty of a paycheck. And right now, there is no certainty of a paycheck because you can get fired at any time for any reason whatsoever. And there's going to be people who will, hopefully, demand more say in the functions of the company. So I'm optimistic about that. Whether or not we'll be the generation to make mass changes, I don't know. But I do see this whole coronavirus thing as a certain rise of the laborer understanding that they don't have a position of power in their company and don't have any say over what happens. And I think there will be a change from the labor who doesn't care, necessarily about how much they get paid. Well, not how much they get paid, but they don't care about,
how the companies run.
Exactly, how the companies run.
Politics in general. Right?
Sure. Yeah. But they do care about making money, and they do care about being able to provide for their kids and provide for their wife. And I think there's going to be a big change from this system that they have no power into to a system where they can have some say over what happens in the company. And I think, that's ultimately desirable for the majority of the population. And, I think this is really going to fire up people to try and fight for those changes.
I hope so.
So, yeah. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, definitely.
How long we've been going for?
For a while.
2 hours, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And let me just, I want to say this real quick.
Yeah.
We talked about race.
Remarks. Yeah.
We talked
Sorry
about
that, guys.
Our intentions were just simply this, that we just want to understand, the problem.
Yeah.
And we want to discuss it, and there should be no, we shouldn't be, not talking about it just because it's a touchy subject.
Yeah.
It's a touchy subject, and we should try and discuss it, figure out what the problems are, and try and solve those problems.
Yeah, I think that.
And so us discussing it was, both of our positions being strengthened.
Yeah, just good Socratic discussion. But I think ultimately, any conversation about race needs to include people of color, and that, just two white dudes sitting in a garage talking about it.
We're not doing anything groundbreaking, that's for sure.
and we're relatively uninformed because we don't experience it.
That's right.
The way people of color do. And I don't know. I just feel a little bit iffy about that whole conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
me too.
I felt like I was trying to do my best to fight against racism, but I feel like I said some racist stuff in doing so.
Yeah, I probably did too.
But you guys, I don't know. I hope you guys realize we try to have the best intentions.
Yeah,
and anything that bad we said, it was inadvertent.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I'm just real.
I know exactly what you mean.
Like I'm like pensive about the whole podcast. You know.
Yeah. I feel like it's a good conversation to have, but it's also one that is so delicate.
Yeah.
Because
it is such nasty implications.
Exactly.
Like racism
and another thing,
such an ugly monster. You know.
Yeah. And another thing,
And
we're making this up on the spot too. Like we're trying to make an entertaining podcast.
Yeah.
We're trying to entertain. That's what we're trying to do. So the stuff that we're talking about, we're pretty uninformed people. In general about race.
You know. Yeah.
So we're kind of making this stuff up as we go.
Yeah.
And we're speaking in very vague and broad terms.
Yeah.
Too.
Which is irresponsible. I feel like next time
we need some data.
We can do good amount of data, good amount of research.
Yeah.
Learn, get some concrete examples of racism, like you're saying, got good concrete evidence. So next time we talk about such a important subject,
hopefully we'll be better prepared.
Hopefully we'll be better prepared. We apologize for that.
Yeah.
It's irresponsible.
But again, our intentions are just this. I think we're both just trying to find the truth, right? We're both trying to figure out what's true and what's not true, and what should we believe and what should we not believe. And we hope you learned something. I certainly did learn something from Eric. Eric's a very intelligent guy.
and I learned something from you, Gabe.
Good. And that's all our discussions that we have are very Socratic. We just want to learn from each other and figure out what the best thing is. That's it. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to learn from each other, have a good conversation with each other, and hopefully form our position stronger, and be better informed coming out of this. And I hope you guys did too.
Yeah.
And if you made it up to this point, we love you.
We love you. Appreciate you.
2 hours, 45 minutes. And if you are new to this podcast, welcome. Check out the other things. If you enjoyed, give us a like, comment, and a subscribe.
Yeah.
Please write a comment too, because we don't want the discussion to end here.
Right.
We want it to continue.
Be a part of the conversation. It's not just me and Gabe talking in the garage.
That's
we
right.
want it to be a continuation of the discussion of truth. And
That's right.
Socratic ideals and all that good stuff.
All that good stuff.
Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like this is not our best. Not our best
No,
podcast.
no. Not our best podcast.
Yeah,
but I think the reason why it wasn't our best is because we just didn't have enough evidence over our whole race debate.
Yeah.
But
and I don't know. I feel I don't know. Generally, like being in quarantine, I'm just not.
Yeah.
Not
your
doing
brain
so well.
isn't as sharp, right?
Yeah. Like I'm just watching too much damn Netflix and not doing anything, and
I hear that, man.
Yeah, just down and out. So it's
you need human interaction
to
keep your brain healthy.
Yeah. So it's I don't know. I feel like that's probably a root cause of us not doing so well today.
Exactly.
Right? So we're just generally not. I'll speak from. I'm not in the best place generally.
No, and I don't think anyone really is right now.
Yeah, and
it's hard being inside.
Yeah, man.
Especially if you're a social guy.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyways, thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening
to the Outle
like
podcast.
And subscribe. Give us a comment. All that good stuff. Yeah.
The Outle podcast. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.